um, been in closed session, so please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, can we just go through the attendance again?
Sure. Jason Tron,
Here.
Jeannie Engelkemeyer,
Here.
Sonali Patil,
Here.
Robin Cleek, Hiralu Gata,
Here.
Ida Mueller,
Here.
Jeff Bard.
Here. Okay, 7 board members present, 0 absent. I'd like to make just an adjustment to the agenda. On the discussion items, I'd like to move discussion item number 2 and switch it with number 1. So we'll discuss the School of Dual Language expansion recommendation first, and then the student achievement Human X report second. Is that okay with everybody? Yep. Okay. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment at this time? How many hands could I see? Okay, come on up. There's a sign-in sheet, and if you could state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Alberta Mendoza. Address is 1444 Wimpole in Mundelein. We're actually here to just say that my child, Adeline Mendoza, goes to the dual language program. I also do have a 5th grader at Townline. And we decided to make that switch to the dual language program because we noticed that both of our languages are very important. They're even. There's not one that's higher or the other one. So it is important for both of our languages to be spoken evenly, fairly. And I would definitely like to have and extend the dual language towards the middle school, not just for my child that we speak one language, but I do want to have my child's friends speak the same language and not see it as we just speak one language, or they could be from a different country and still speak the same language. So I think it's important to give the people that don't have Spanish-speaking parents to have a child that speaks Spanish or a different language, to have that chance as well as we have that chance, and we stand together as one person and one school, so why not give them the chance as well? And we're actually from the BPAC committee as well.
Hello, my name is Maria Herrera. I'm living 639 Allenson Road, and I have 2 kids right now in the dual language program. But I had another 2 that went through the program, and my oldest daughter, she's 19, and my son is 15. They have a wonderful experience, and they love it, and they were really happy with that. And I really wanted the kids have the opportunity to growing up in the middle school too. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your comments.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to comment? Okay. We have a consent agenda tonight consisting of the board minutes from February 13th, the closed session minutes from February 13th, attorney review of closed session minutes, expenditure reports, and a personnel report. Any discussion?
Yes, I had a quick question. The leave of absence that we have for Dr. Tomei, who will be taking care? in
Mr.
his
Abrego,
absence?
Mr. Abrego will step in. Yeah, he's prepared to go.
Okay, any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
My second.
Motion by Jeannie, second by Robin. Since it contains an expenditure report, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes. Lou Gata.
Aye.
Gita Mueller.
Aye.
Jeff Bard.
Aye.
Robin Cleek. Aye. Sonali Patil.
Aye.
Jeannie Engelkmeyer.
Aye.
Jason Tron.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 7 ayes, 0 nay. We have 4 discussion items tonight. The first is a School of Dual Language expansion recommendation.
Yes, the administrative team has been working on this. If you recall, as far back as September, we had sent you some information looking at staffing, and Mr. Abrego is here to give you a presentation and go through what we have found. And feel free to ask him a few questions as we go. And he about ready there?
I'm about to hook up.
You got to hook up. As he's preparing for that. Oh, there we go. I think you have a copy also that was sent to you. And then,
All set?
ready to go? Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure.
Very
Okay, perfect. I want to thank the Board of Education for this opportunity to present tonight. I also want to take this opportunity to thank a variety of different individuals and groups. First of all, I'd like to thank our parent community. I think a majority of them may be here right now. I've been able to receive some feedback, important support, either through surveys, small group discussions, one-to-one discussions, email correspondence. I also want to thank, you saw 2 of the individuals here that came up to speak. Those are 2 members. Those are the vice presidents of our BBAC committee, and I wanted to extend my thanks to them for the work that they have done with our Hispanic community throughout the entire district. We talk not only about the dual language program, but the importance of bilingual education, especially for our Latino students, who many of our students are speaking both English and Spanish, but the majority of the parents still may be speaking Spanish, even though some of them are learning English, as you can see very well. But it's important for us to have our students make those connections. Can you hear me?
I think they're a little low. Can we turn the mics up just slightly? They seem a little.
Sir, can you hear me in the back?
Can we turn the mics up a little bit?
Is it on?
It's on.
Okay, how's that?
That's a little better.
You know, I need to slow down too because I think that we are translating, so I have to remember that also. Again, I want to extend my thanks to the parent community. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Tomei and the School of Dual Language. Throughout the last 2 years, you have received a variety of different information from the school regarding the innovations that are occurring, and they are research innovations. It is the cutting-edge research that we are putting into place in the School of Dual Language. I also want to take the opportunity to thank our middle school administration and our district office who have helped me develop this particular proposal for you tonight. Especially want to thank the middle school administration for giving me a better understanding of middle school programming and scheduling, which is a unique thing in itself. The purpose of our presentation tonight is to briefly review programming, dual language programming. Also to talk about the evolution of the program within our school district, and to talk about the current language programming that is offered to our graduates of the School of Dual Language once they enter the middle school. And then I'm going to outline for you a proposal for a middle school dual language program, which will include specific goals, program configuration, program location, the types of investments and resources that we need to allocate for this particular program, a timeline consideration, and then I'll present you with a formal recommendation for you to consider and to ponder. Please stop me at any point if you'd like to ask any questions. For me, the dual language program is a celebration and a reflection of our mission statement. Research has clearly indicated that dual language programs are the most effective types of programs for students who are acquiring a second language. The program is designed to close the achievement gap, and every decision that we make within the program is targeted towards our second language learners. The program is directly aligned to our strategic plan, and it provides an enriched educational program for all of our students. It is one of the programs that we have in our district where the guaranteed bio-curriculum is exactly the same for each of our students across the district. The additional enrichment program is the addition of a new language for many of our students. Countless research has been conducted on the effectiveness of dual language programming. Here is a sample of some information, most recent research associated with dual language programming. I know that in the past that you've received some other information regarding research for dual language programming. It has been extensively researched. The Illinois State Board of Education currently is encouraging school districts around the state to move to dual language programming for their bilingual educational programs. It is something that the Illinois State Board of Education is truly supporting across the board. Most recently, our school district was invited by Nick to meet with the Lake County superintendents and to outline our program, our philosophy, and the evolution of our program, because many school districts around the Lake County area are now looking towards this type of programming. And I know that Hawthorne was sort of on the cutting edge of that particular programming, I believe beginning in 2001. And so that we see this sort of evolution occurring not only across the Lake County area, but across the state and really, really across the country. Again, our commitment to the dual language program is well documented. I've outlined sort of a timeline for you to take a look at sort of the evolution of the program. Each of those respective years that there has been some significant change in the program, either starting off as a single strand, moving that particular strand to a particular school, opening the School of Dual Language, developing an advanced language program at the middle school, solidifies the program, enhances the program. And throughout each of those respective years, it also sort of reinforces our commitment to bilingual education. This is an extremely diverse community, and our programming for our Hispanic students has sort of taken an evolution to providing more and more native language instruction. We've also seen that with other languages. We have a Russian bilingual program in some of our schools, and we are currently reviewing the possibility of having additional programming in various Asian language and Indian languages. As I indicated before, the evolution has sort of solidified our commitment. One of the commitments that we have seen has been an elementary north. Throughout the last few years, we have solidified that program to incur not only a resource program, but a self-contained one-way bilingual program. We have many students that participate. Currently, that program is K through 4. Next year, we see that evolution occurring into the K-5 program. That particular program was developed and reflected off the School of Dual Language. The goals that we have for that particular program are bilingualism, biliteracy, and enhancing their exposure to biculturalism. We have, as I indicated before, resource programs at Elementary South, Aspen, Middle School South, and Middle School North, and Russian resource programs at Townline and Elementary South. As I indicated before, throughout the last 2 years, you have received information from the School of Dual Language regarding their program. It is a two-way immersion program. It's an 80-20. Which gradually moves to a 50-50. And again, the 80-20 means that the majority of the exposure in early grades is in Spanish, and then we balance off as we move into the upper grades, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The middle school placement for our students is a course that was developed, I believe, in 2007, and it is an advanced Spanish program, and it's a 40-minute daily program for our students. And so we move from a 50-50 in 5th grade to a 12% sort of exposure to instruction in Spanish for 6th grade for those particular students. And I want to sort of highlight the sort of construction of that particular class. It is an advanced Spanish course and designed to sort of build the bridge between the immersion program at the School of Dual Language and world language programs at the high school. And based on my conversations with the middle school administration, based on my conversation with the classroom teachers, it's conducted more so in relationship to a world language program as opposed to an immersion program. Part of that is based on the fact that it is a one-period course at this point. And so this is in addition to the English language arts class, so all of our students participate in the Spanish, in the advanced Spanish, who are dual language students, and also an English language program, typically involved with all of our middle school students. And again, they do focus on Spanish, and they focus on the WIDA Spanish language arts standards at this moment.
Do all kids from the School of Dual Language in the middle school take those classes?
It is provided as an option to them. I believe Dr. Tomei has indicated between 95% and 100% of those students participate in those courses. And they're offered both at Middle School South and Middle School North. I sort of want to talk about sort of the placements for those particular students. And it has been successful, and I want to truly indicate that the work that has been conducted over the years has been successful as we see advanced placements for our students in the variety of different high schools that they attend. But the question is always asked, can we in some way, shape, or form provide a better program for them? We believe that creating a program that has more time allocated to Spanish language instruction and that sort of integrates language and content in a variety of different courses can further the development of our students' abilities metalinguistically and metacognitively, can improve their language proficiency in Spanish, can improve their abilities bilingually, but also has a significant impact on their cognitive development. I think that research has truly indicated that students who are bilingual are much more proficient at sort of flexible thinking, problem solving, and being able to have a sort of connection, being able to connect with a variety of different people from different cultures. And they do have that ability if they are, in fact, speaking to other individuals who speak Spanish. The other aspect is for us is including and enhancing this particular program at the middle school sort of focuses on one of the things that we're really focused on as a school district, and that is closing the achievement gap that we currently have between our Latino students and our white students, and some that has been sort of articulated to you by Dr. Sorali in the past and has been outlined by Dr. Tomei and his leadership team. It is an effort that we have been focused on over the last few years, and we are determined to close that gap. And some of the data that was presented to you last week, the last board meeting, indicated that we see some of that closure, but we still see a gap. And the thoughts that we have and the belief that we have is that providing that strategic instruction in the middle school bilingually in an immersion type of program would provide that platform to further close that gap for our students.
Mr. Abrego?
Yes.
Before we go to the next slide, just want to remind folks now that the next slide start talking about dual language at middle schools, and that this is the first presentation to you with the information formulated out and designed out on what it would look like at a middle school level. I want to remind folks that we usually try to present information to you in one board meeting and then come back later at another board meeting and answer questions and potentially have action items and things of that sort. Definitely please ask questions as we're going through here, but just wanted to remind folks this is your first presentation, so if you don't think of your question now and you send those to me later, we'll make sure they get answered at the next board meeting, because sometimes you got to digest through these pieces. But just so folks know, this is out that may be watching or listening, it's the first real presentation to the board on what a dual language middle school program would look like, and it's not been presented before. We've presented information about our current program. So,
Absolutely.
Mr. Brego.
And so the next slide, we'll talk about sort of what that would look like in the middle school. And one of the things I talked about is sort of increasing the opportunity to be able to use Spanish language, to use their bilingual skills. And one of the things that we look at is sort of extending the goals that we currently have at the School of Dual Language to incorporate that in the middle school. So we would adopt the goals of the School of Dual Language at this point to focus on academic growth and development, closing the achievement gap, focusing on bilingualism, biliteracy, and that enhancement of cultural awareness. We call it biculturally, but it's a variety of different cultures that we become aware of and that the students are exposed to. That sort of would be the foundation which we would build the program upon. And again, that particular program will be built on a foundation that has been clearly researched throughout educational. The program configuration, what it would look like. We would increase the opportunities of Spanish language instruction by initially taking a look at the advanced Spanish course and sort of enhancing that particular course and focusing more on a Spanish literacy course. And one of the things to be able to do is sort of make a more direct integrated connection with ELA. The sort of expectations that we would have curricularly for those students would be very, very common as far as the ELA is concerned, as far as comprehension skills are concerned, working with text and that nature. It would be specific skills that we would work on Spanish language development. But we would also want to be able to extend that literacy course to make connections with other content areas, specifically the two other content areas that we're recommending, one of them being social studies and one of them being science. And as I indicated before, the Advanced Spanish tries to make that connection right now in many ways, but it is more of a world language program as opposed to what I would consider under the umbrella of an immersion program. This Spanish literacy class would have connections not only with ELA, but would have connections directly with the content areas that we're focusing on, which would be instructed, and I want to be careful here, the target language would be Spanish, but we would adhere to some of the same philosophies that we're putting into place at the School of Dual Language, allowing our students to be able to use all of their resources to be able to connect with content, so to be able to use their skills bilingually. The teacher will maintain a target language, but the students would learn bilingually and take a look at being able to get content across and then sort of focus on what kind of language areas that we need to be able to support our students in.
Can I-
Yes.
So I understand the content and translanguaging in social studies and science. I'm still not clear about how your advanced Spanish language, which is supposed to be VEDA, which is supposed to be preparing our students to go into high school, and how is that different from the Spanish language literacy class? And if we do change it, how is that going to look for them when they start taking the placement test for high school? Because right now, what we have is meant for their placement test for high school.
Absolutely. And I think that
How will that be affected?
I think that there's an evolution that occurs both ways. I think that one of the things that will occur is we'd like the advanced placement for our students. I think that that's something that's very beneficial, and I think that's something that we would want to continue to occur, and we believe that it would occur. I've seen this at Highland Park High School. When I was in Highland Park and we developed the middle school program, what occurs is that there is a change that not only occurs, when I say both ways, it occurs within the kindergarten program, because students become you're looking at targets that are changing, and it occurs at the high school level. I could see the development of additional courses within the high school to extend the social studies.
No, that is not my question.
Okay, I'm so sorry that I don't understand.
I am not talking about social studies and science. I'm just
Talking about the
the
language.
Spanish language,
Hmm.
which in high school, because we can't expect them, or nor do we know whether they will or will not change whatever programming they have.
Hmm.
Right now, the way we teach advanced Spanish is so that our dual language kids will place and test into the Spanish 3 program for what the Spanish language curriculum in high school is. How is the Spanish language literacy class going to be different from the advanced Spanish class, and how does it prepare our kids to get into a Spanish 3 program?
Well, conceptually, I would think that they would incorporate both. The ability to be able to sort of extend and make those connections to social studies and science, and to be able to continue that path into advanced placement. One of the things that we would do, and I would outline that in the next slides that come up, is the planning period that would occur. And any changes that we would make in regards to that particular course would be in conjunction with our current teachers and would be in conjunction with the high school. So we would work sort of as a partnership to sort of evolve that class and develop that. Do I have those particular goals and expectations outlined for myself right now? No, because I wouldn't do that without cooperation and collaboration with those particular teachers. But we would like to be able to see that occur. I have seen it occur in other school districts where placement still occurs within those particular world language programs in the high school. But I've also seen the fact that the high school has also expanded their programming for students also. So I don't know if that answers your question. I would say to you that it would be something that we would be working on and planning with our current advanced Spanish teachers and in coordination with the high school.
We would anticipate, I think we would anticipate our students in this type of a model to be placed similarly in high school as they are now.
So how is the class different? So why is it not called advanced Spanish or whatever it is called right now? When you're calling it a literacy class, what is differing in that class? What are you teaching differently from an advanced Spanish class?
Well, we're focusing on the language itself, but we're also making really extended content connections with social studies and science to enhance that ability to for those particular students to sort of integrate language and content. Those are the things that we're doing.
It's almost like a more holistic approach to the Spanish language and the cultural connections and those aspects of it, as opposed to more of a world language where you're teaching a second language and there's not as much culturally that's.
I could provide you with additional information regarding that.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So if the goal is still to get them into Spanish 3, what's the point of expanding the program? Because
Or even
if
higher.
you're still placing in a Spanish 3, you're still going to stagnate at the same point in high school.
Or the high school begins to sort of change their programming too on the needs of our particular students.
We have no control over that.
Absolutely, you're right. But-
My other question is, how did you choose social studies and science? Is that what other programs that go through middle school choose as their content areas for bilingualism, or how
Social
did that get
studies
chosen?
is a course that is lends itself to sort of cultural connections in those particular areas. In collaboration with not only my conversations with other school districts such as Woodstock and Highland Park, science was also selected based on my conversations with the middle school administration about the availability of that particular content area and to be able to extend those opportunities as far as language development. We could have chosen math, but we thought that since there are a variety of different math courses in the middle school, that we wanted to be able to have our students be able to select or be placed in different math placements in the middle school. Those are the reasons why we selected
But you're
those.
definitely proposing core academics versus social studies and a related arts, or
Right. Right. And one of the conversations I had with Nick was about the fact of if we're going to move this way, and one of the things that we talked about is having academic sort of exposure and content, that we look at these particular areas here.
Thank you.
So the social studies in Spanish would replace the social studies in English, same with the
It
science,
would be
right?
the same academic expectations that we would have for any student taking the social studies course.
Yep.
The instructional target language would be
Question is, they're not
Spanish.
having two science classes, they're not having two
No.
social studies.
No.
How about the language literacy? Will they still have an
They'll
English
still have an
ELA?
ELA course.
Okay. So
Yes.
The bottom two replaces
Yes.
social studies. The top
Just
one
the language of
is an
instruction.
extra language instruction on top of
And
their
at the top one
ELA.
again is sort of just sort of the enhancement of the advanced Spanish program.
Would there be a minimum Spanish proficiency to be able to take these classes?
No, we would expect that the majority of our students who are in the School of Dual Language to be able to go in. However, we would also take into consideration those students who are attending Elementary North, who are sort of in a one-way program. This is also an opportunity for us to take a look at newcomers who come to the middle school. And we would assess our newcomers as we assess every newcomer to determine their proficiency in their native language. And to be able to provide an opportunity for our middle school students, newcomers, to sort of have a connection and to be able to sort of extend and explore the things that they know and to be able to demonstrate their knowledge in their native language eases their transition into a new culture. Again, one of the things that we would talk about is the fact that once you sort of introduce this type of programming into the middle school, you're changing culturally the middle school itself in many ways, because our typical approach to newcomers is to say, okay, we've got them for 3 years, we need to get English as quickly as possible. Some of the things that we're doing here is saying we need to be able to support them in their transition of English by still providing some native language instruction for them. And again, I go back to the research. The research has clearly indicated to us that providing that native language support is a benefit for our particular students. And again, when we talk about a subgroup within our population right now, not only within this particular community and area, but across the country, the Latino community has been shown to show an achievement gap at this point. And research has indicated that this type of programming can close that. And what we have done through the audit and through sort of really taking a look in the mirror of the things that we're doing is sort of rebuilding our program based on the current research. And it has been, difficult. And I will be honest, it has been difficult because we are changing some of the things that we are very accustomed to doing, but we're changing them for the right reason. The reason we're doing it is for children and to be able to do that. We just want to extend that opportunity up in the middle school areas.
Would this be an a la carte or an all or nothing? If they choose this, they have to take all three?
Well,
Or-
I would say to you that what would be ideal for us is to be able to say this is the programming for those particular students, and to extend that particular opportunity for them. Again, I would work with our middle school administration. I would work with our parents. I know that the middle school offers a variety of different opportunities for our students. I would say to you that being able to have our students be sort of involved and exposed to continue with Spanish language development, bilingual development, is something very extremely beneficial for them. The world has changed, and I think I included that within my memo. The way that the Spanish language is truly being developed here in the United States, I think, without remembering everything, I think that we are the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, following Mexico. We have surpassed Spain and Colombia, and it's going to continue to grow. We just want to provide our students with the opportunity to be able to sort of embrace that language, embrace that culture, and have opportunities as they move forward. Again, either in the Spanish language or, as research has indicated, additional languages as they move to the high school or college.
One more question on
Sure.
the programming part of it. Our dual language students, we ask for a commitment. Start kindergarten, stay there till 5th grade. If they start 6th grade here, are we going to expect them to stay in this program all the way through 8th grade, or is there any option to change? Or is that
I
unknown?
mean, we would ask for a commitment. We ask for a variety of different, but parents can choose to, at any particular point. We'd like to be able to continue that programming. I would indicate that in my conversations with the middle school administration, I think the majority of those students maintain their placement in the advanced Spanish. My conversations with 8th grade students to the seal of biliteracy is, it's amazing to see students be able to articulate in a second language. And I want to be clear, in a second language, both in Spanish, for those particular students who are learning that particular language, and for many of our Hispanic students in English. That accomplishment is as great as a student who is learning Spanish. The fact of being able to master the English language, to be able to use that English language in an academic setting, in social situations, and to be able to be fully bilingual is an accomplishment. And one that we typically expect our Hispanic students or second language students to master and to have, but it is a major accomplishment for them, one that should be celebrated. Yes.
Sorry, one more question. I can appreciate what you're saying about newcomers, and I definitely get your point. My concern is, one of the advantages of our dual language program amongst the challenges compared to the rest of the district is we've been able to control that population, predict the class size, predict staffing, all that other stuff.
Absolutely.
If we now take in newcomers that didn't come up through the dual language program, how are we ever going to predict enrollment numbers in our already cramped middle schools?
I've outlined that within the memo. I think that the first prioritization always goes to the School of Dual Language. I think that, then we talk about elementary north, and then we talk about newcomers. And I've had these conversations with the middle school administrators. I will tell you that based on my conversations with them, bring them on. They're more than willing to be able to try to support them and to be able to do those things. But you're absolutely right. We want to be able to sort of, in any way, shape, or form, we don't want to impinge on the integrity of a particular program. And so we would always be constantly very vigilant about those number of supports. Our supports can come in a variety of different ways if we come to a point where we cannot provide that programming for those students. We have our traditional programming, but it could be opportunities for kids to come in.
Right, but just in the argument of fairness that seems to come up quite a bit, if one year you've got 40 newcomers to the program and the next year you have 15, and you can't keep hiring and laying off and
No,
all the rest
absolutely.
of it, at what point or how are the newcomers chosen who would have access to this versus at what point is that cap? Where is that cutoff?
I think that we can come up with that particular process as far as identifying those particular students. We would take a look at some of the assessments that we can currently conduct with them, and to sort of identify those particular students who have a really good sort of hold in their native language, and those students who may need some additional supports. We also have a variety of different individuals in the middle school who do speak Spanish, and so currently, right now, even though we don't have that particular program, we are trying to provide those supports to our newcomers in a variety of different ways. And again, I speak about this particular program because it is one that we're discussing, and it's the language of Spanish, but that also occurs in a variety of different languages that we have professionals or individuals that speak other languages that we're providing that support. But you're right, Robin. We need to be able to sort of identify sort of a process and criteria for that, and we can develop that. And I have no doubt that working with the middle school administration and working with central office, that we can come up with that particular process and sort of adhere, trying to meet the needs of our students and maintain the integrity of the program. And again, the resources, at one point are limited. You can't continue to expand. So, any other questions? Should I? We'll talk about location. And again, the question would be: would this be a single site location, or would this be located in each of the respective sites as we currently have the advanced Spanish program? If there are sort of opportunities and challenges with each of those respective perspectives. In a single site, programmatically, you can provide much more targeted professional development to that particular school. You can develop sort of a collaborative culture among those teachers. And you can share resources much more readily than you can if we have the site on two different schools. The challenge is space. The challenge is enrollment. And I know that the board is clearly aware of all those challenges that we currently have within each of the respective schools and in the middle school. And choosing one particular site and adding additional students adds transportation cost. It adds additional students to a particular school, which causes additional challenges as far as programming and scheduling. My conversations with the with the middle school administration is the fact that a one-site program would be very, very difficult to sort of articulate. And I can sort of review that as we go forward, but anything that we can do as far as professional development, anything that we can do regarding collaboration, anything that we can do as far as resources, we can do in both sites. We would allocate additional resources and time to do that, but it can be accomplished because we're doing it now. And we can continue to do that. The challenge for us, again, is about space and having additional students in one particular site, either being north or south, would add additional sort of tension to that particular program or school. When we talk about resources, we talk about professional development, and I've talked a little bit about that. One of the things, and I sort of, to answer your question, Sonali, or to sort of review it again, is that we would work in coordination with our teachers right now to develop units, to take a look at Spanish literacy, science, and social studies. How do we incorporate the Spanish language arts, Spanish language development standards within each of those respective areas? The professional development is something that we can plan for, we can budget for, we can address. The most significant issue is staffing. And the most significant issue is to be able to identify individuals who have the credentials, the bilingual endorsement, and the content area endorsement. I believe that we can use our current advanced Spanish teachers and move them and shift them to a Spanish literacy program and to continue that programming with that. It is identifying science and social studies teachers to be able to do that. And it is essential that we begin that process if the board is inclined to go forward with this program to identify those individuals, because as readily as we want to sort of identify this program with science and social studies, and if the board approves that particular program, it's finding the individuals to be able to teach those courses. And again, there are individuals out there, they're just not as readily available who can speak Spanish and have those endorsements. And I could talk a little bit further about some of the things that we are planning to do if we move forward in this endeavor.
Before you go on.
Yes.
Based on your conversations with Highland Park and Woodstock, how hard has it been for them to get the content-specific bilingual teachers?
Some of them have been identified within their own ranks, individuals
How
who,
many do we have?
my analysis right now is that we have one or two who could move into that particular position. We also have the ability to take a look and see if we can encourage individuals. These are the things that I want to be able to discuss as we move forward to identifying staffing. How can we support our staff to move towards that particular endeavor, sort of looking at
That is almost like a teacher who's, to become bilingual. I mean, that is a long time endeavor.
yeah,
It's-
I
it
was
is-
looking more so at our bilingual teachers looking at a endorsement in the middle school area, because that would be
But
sort
how
of
many do we have? That's what I'm asking.
right now we have one who has a middle school endorsement in math and one who has a middle school endorsement in social studies.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
Right.
we have just two, so they already, but we don't have any bilingual teachers already who are content specific.
No,
Who
we
are
don't.
not there. We don't have
No,
them.
no, but we need to be able to find them. And again, as Highland Park developed their particular program, they went out to search for those particular individuals. And I can highlight some of the things that that district has done to be able to identify those individuals. Some of them is about identifying individuals in their own ranks and be able to support them as they went on to endorsements. There is a continued sort of articulation with the colleges that we should engage in more with CPEL, with Loyola University, identifying individuals at DePaul University. I also think that, we should explore the option of actually, with the Illinois State Board of Education, sort of the teacher exchange program from Spain. That's how Highland Park began theirs. They articulated and they went to Spain and interviewed individuals. And the Illinois State Board of Education is aligned with this particular program. And those individuals that do come from Spain are endorsed and have the Spanish language skills and have the endorsement areas in those particular areas that we're looking for. And so these are things that we further explore and to be able to do. Highland Park, I believe those individuals that were identified, I think 4 of them came initially. 3 of the 4 remain and are still here. And that's been over 15 years that they have worked their way to becoming sort of long-term residents here in the United States. So there are options out there, but you're absolutely right. If you cannot find the individual, the expansion of the program is contingent on identifying those particular individuals. And again, one of the things that I would encourage us to do is sort of to take the year to plan this out, to be able to say if the board is inclined to do this, that it doesn't occur this summer, that we need to be able to take time to be able to develop the units, to develop a plan for recruitment, develop a plan to identify these individuals, to have advertisement out for our particular positions, and to really recruit and to go out there and get them. Again, some individuals who are currently in other districts might be very inclined to be moving to the middle school program, where their heart is in middle school dual bilingual program and dual language programming. And so that's another opportunity for us to explore too.
How do you plan on planning the units a year in advance when you have only 2 content-specific teachers?
We would identify individuals that are currently in the School of Dual Language and also take a look at our content level specialists at the middle school level and work together. We understand that would be a challenge, but we have individuals and specialists and language specialists at the School of Dual Language, and we have content specialists at the middle school. So to bring those individuals together, to be able to develop those units, I think is doable. And again, we provide sort of a foundation for those individuals coming in. So I think that's something that we can readily do. We have units in social studies. We need to incorporate Spanish language development. Again, we would not in any way, shape, or form with the UBD units talk about sort of the learning experience, but we would outline sort of the expectations and the assessments. And as far as the Spanish language development standards are concerned, I have no doubt that we can identify those individuals to do that.
You
Yes.
know about how much extra Highland Park is having to pay teachers at the middle school level to be both bilingual and content specific over what they're paying the rest of their staff?
I'm not really familiar with their tier structure as far as that is concerned. I think that there was a question that was presented by the board at one point as far as the costs, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I think I was.
Yeah. At this point, we'll put in a figure, typically what we put in for any individual as we move forward with a particular program. You know, as far as, you know, we talk about cost savings and things of that nature, you know, we can support our students in a variety of different ways. Students who are learning English as their second language, sometimes with a bilingual specialist, sometimes with a dual language teacher, who not only provides them general education instruction, but also provides them with their ELL instruction. So as we move up to the middle school, you know, we're providing that additional set of support for those students. I can try to find out for you, but and I can reach out to Monica, who's the personnel person there. But you know, individuals, as far as a pay scale is concerned, I think there may be a differentiation there, but I don't know if they have a tiered system in their particular program.
I'm just curious if it's like an
Okay.
extra 1%, 5%,
I'm not sure.
10%.
I don't have that
Not-
information.
Not that outrageous of a difference.
And we wouldn't necessarily differentiate
Right.
salaries. What we might find is that you would hire somebody with a few years' experience as opposed to brand new, because they're willing to come from another
Right, but
district.
we all know the more obscure the,
Yeah, it's
know,
more
I mean-
difficult. Right.
they can demand more.
And again, I think that as we explore these particular options, one of the options, again, to look at is really speaking to other districts that have gone to Spain and to take a look at sort of this support that's provided for those individuals, the type of, you know, the salary, they agree to a particular salary, the salary that we're offering based on the contract that we have within the district. And typically the teachers that are coming from Spain are experienced teachers, 2 to 3 years already in the system. It is something that the Spanish Council has been doing for many years. I was on the initial development team at Highland Park about 25 years ago. One of the things that we explored was going to Spain to identify those teachers. Again, the timeline here, what I would recommend at this point was that we take the entire year to sort of identify some of these curricular things that we need to be able to do as far as content and the units are concerned. But really, truly focusing on sort of staffing for this particular program. And I can provide to Nick sort of some alternatives for us to take a look for staffing. We could take a look at curricular resources and begin to budget for those particular areas, and then begin sort of budgeting for staffing as we move forward. You know, the initial year I would recommend be 2018 to 2019. We would like to have it in these 3 areas here. And we'd like to be able to really solidify the connections between the middle schools and the School of Dual Language to provide our parents with additional opportunities for multicultural events, but also educational events throughout their experience at Hawthorne. You know, I took a look and I worked with Brad, and I've worked as far as taking a look at some investment projections, and I call them investments. If we look at one site, we probably need to add a route in the busing. But again, I don't think that that's something that I would recommend. I think that we would go to our respective sites as we currently do, and those students are being transported within the designated budget as has been outlined in the past. Materials, we would add to the current materials that we have within our programming. As far as allocation of budget, I would take a look at my Title III budget to allocate some additional areas as far as materials are concerned. I would also take a look at sort of professional development, also looking to extend that opportunity to the middle school. I provided a significant amount of professional development for a variety of different teachers across the district, not only within the School of Dual Language, but I've provided that opportunity to general education teachers, to our ELL specialists throughout the last couple of years, and I have no doubt that we can incorporate additional individuals within that area. My budget requires me to do a significant amount of professional development, and my grant managers at the state are always encouraging us to sort of move forward with that particular endeavor. The other aspect is the fact of the coordination of the fact of a one-to-one sort of initiative at the middle school. That provides us with additional opportunities for our students to sort of articulate with authentic text in a variety of different countries, Spanish-speaking countries, that they can gain access to. So that would help us in our opportunities to do those things. The cost is in relationship to personnel, and we are projecting at this point a need, if we do this in both middle schools, an initial increase of 4.0 staff members to be able to articulate this particular program. 2 for social studies in each of the respective schools, and 2 for science. We would review staffing at the end of 2 years to determine if we need additional staffing. The other cost is in relationship to taking a look at existing space and refitting or retrofitting those particular spaces to meet the needs. I've talked to Brad regarding that particular aspect. In a general classroom with furniture, typically $7,600. If we're looking at a science and bringing in lab tables and doing all the other things that we need to do, typically it's a $20,000 investment for that particular class. Again, I'm presenting this to you sort of in isolation, but I also know that currently the community is considering a referendum, and we're considering some possible additions and renovations to the middle schools. Part of that is in this equation, and I know that's sort of tied together, and so I present this information sort of as what we could do with the existing space. And I've had conversations with the middle school administration, and we've identified some locations that we currently have, either a computer lab or an existing area that is used, and sort of retrofitting those particular areas.
Are you recommending the first year that we start with 6th grade, or that we start with all 3 grades?
We start with 6th grade. I
And
think
then
that
the
we move
second
forward
year.
with
Okay.
that particular endeavor. We'd like to be able to provide that opportunity for, possibly with other individuals in 7th grade, but I think our focus would be within the 6th grade.
And then you've determined that there's no way we could do anything in the fall?
My recommendation is that we would take the year to be able to do the things that we need to be able to do. I think it's imperative that when we start a program, we start on the best foundation possible. It is it March? And we have staffing that we're going to consider for tomorrow, as far as the administrative team is concerned. In my conversations with the fact that we are doing a variety of different things as far as one-to-one is concerned for next year, that's sort of an endeavor that's occurring within the middle school. To add this additional endeavor right now with the time that we have, I think would be an additional stressor that I think is difficult. I think in order to fully plan, fully recruit, fully articulate the program that we want, we take the year to be able to do that. We take some of the time right now. We want to go visit some programs. We want to take our teachers to be able to see that. We want to be able to sit in classrooms and see what's going on. We want to be able to talk to individuals and say, what have you done? What can we do better? We can meet some specialist teachers and say, hey, come on over to Hawthorne, and try to recruit. I know a lot of people in Highland Park.
Call those fishing trips? by the
Yes,
way?
we call them fishing trips. But again, we want to be able to sort of take our time to be able to do this. And although it is a year, it's still, it's just a year to be able to plan all the things out, because everything that we're planning, we're doing in conjunction with everything else that we're doing. And so that's the recommendation that I have. I know that I was speaking very fast. I'm sorry, Christina. Does the board have any additional questions?
Yes, I just wanted to
Yes.
clarify one point. I think I understood you, but I want to make sure. So if for whatever reason we're unable to do additions to the middle school, you're saying we're still able to implement this program, that we found spaces that we can utilize to run this program in all 3 grades?
Yeah, I'll invite the middle school administration to come up if they like, but my conversations with those individuals is that we've identified those particular spaces. Would you agree to that?
And
Yes.
in writing.
I had a question. You made the investment projections, and it's easy to kind of plus or minus determine the dollar amounts on a teacher's salary. But there's a lot of materials which need to be duplicated, as well as, some of the PD. Can we get a dollar amount for that, an estimate? Because, ultimately it needs to come down?
Sure. I know that Dr. Sorelli right now is in the process of looking at social studies materials and looking at science materials. And one of the things that we have done as a district is that we will only look at publishers right now that do programs in both English and Spanish. And so I believe that Dr. Sorelli is incorporating that within her budget at this point in time. We can try to get you sort of an
But it is an
estimate.
extra part in the budget, even if it's in the budget, it is
Right.
an extra part.
Absolutely.
It is not part of the budget that is there. So
Absolutely, yes.
even if it comes out of the budget, we would like to know what that
Sure.
extra amount is.
Yeah, and again, part of that process also is to take a look at my Title III budget, which is not part of the District 73 budget, but is a grant in itself, and I control how that particular budget is allocated. And initial investments into particular materials can always be done because those materials usually last for a few years before we replenish
These
them.
won't, because now when we go to one-to-one, at the end of the year, your subscription gets turned off. So these materials won't last. This is not a textbook.
Mhm.
So this will be an ongoing subscription
Mhm.
every year. So we
Absolutely.
need to know that.
Sure, I can get you that information.
And I had a few other questions, but I'm going to let others go before that.
So am I reading this right in that the middle school principals would be currently overseeing this and we wouldn't be hiring a new separate middle school dual language principal?
No, they would be overseeing this particular program. And I have no doubt that they can do it.
I had a question. Nobody else wants to go. We had, and this is a long time ago, and I read it somewhere, I found it, but I can't remember where my source was, so. We had expanded dual language to middle school for 1 to 2 years, long time ago, and we abandoned that program. What did we learn from it?
I'm not really sure about that particular aspect.
It
I can try
was
to
a
investigate
long
that.
time ago.
How long ago?
I don't know, I read it somewhere in the papers, but it was done.
I never heard of that.
You know what? I could try to investigate that for you.
No?
No.
We'd have to do a
No.
little research, see what might have been.
I know that we had an advanced Spanish program. I think that there was a few years ago a proposal to expand the program.
Yes.
And I believe that that proposal talked about the fact of having the Spanish language instruction occur at the School of Dual Language and having those students walk over to the middle school. But that was sort of
It
an
never
idea
went
that was sort of
anywhere.
just presented, but it wasn't actually articulated or implemented.
Because there are a
into
lot
the
of people, there are a lot of parents and families who were in favor of the expansion of the middle school program. And I just have to thank you so much for your presentation tonight and for the research and the time that you've put into this. Because several years ago, I was teaching at Highland Park, and the Spanish teachers there were fabulous in the dual language program, were wonderful. And one of the regular Spanish teachers, not in the dual language program, had talked about how Hawthorne had come over to Highland Park to start their program. And the only question I have, which is not even that important right now, but it's something even knowing some of the other Spanish teachers in the dual language program have wondered, why has it taken so long? So this is wonderful that now, finally, this is on the table and is being looked at seriously and talked about very seriously. And I think the only sad thing is for those of us who have kids who have gone through dual language and who have not had the chance in the middle school of having the dual language program continued, because to go from a dual language 50-50 program all day long to a mere advanced Spanish class to a 12% is just a loss and a waste of everything you've had from kindergarten on. So I just hope that you continue moving forward with this as smoothly and quickly as you can.
Are there any other questions?
Yes. How many bilingual kids do we have in 5th grade in other elementary schools that we do see as an addition to this dual language program? Because they're taking the bilingual support, but they're not, they're not in the dual language program. So how do you think, would they be able to integrate into this dual language program from 6th to 8th grade? And what is that number? Because our goal in the bilingual program is that we get them out of the bilingual program, isn't it?
There are a variety of different goals depending on the type of programming that we're providing our students. Our students who are receiving TPI instruction or classic ESL instruction, their goal is English language development. Typically, those are students where we have 20 or less students of a particular language. We do have currently in our schools resource bilingual programs, meaning that at a particular school we are providing native language instruction to those students on a pull-out basis for those particular students. The goal for that particular program, for those students, we'd like to be able to maintain their language, but they're moving to English language instruction for those for the outcome because it is a resource program. Trying to replicate a dual language or a self-contained bilingual program on a resource pull-out program is a very difficult
No, I
endeavor.
completely understand. So you mentioned that,
Right.
we have fifth grade students
And
and
the-
they can come in. I mean,
Right.
as your selling point. So I'm asking you.
I'm
So-
getting to that point right now. And at the elementary north, we have a self-contained one-way immersion program that currently, I believe, is K through 4. And we have looked at the enrollment patterns for those particular students from when they are going into 5th grade at the initiation of the program and looking at them all the way through kindergarten, the current class when they're, I believe, the class of 23, 24. So we've looked at those particular numbers. I've had those conversations with each of the respective middle school administration, looking at how those students are divided, not only within the school of dual language, but how they're divided in going into into middle school north. We project the ability to be able to support them in that particular program as we move forward because of the number of students that we
We'll
currently
do a little
have.
research and see what the numbers are, but remember too that some of these folks have not decided to go into the school of dual language. So
No,
they-
I
they're-
completely
right,
understand,
Right, so
but-
they're not going to be forced into this. It would be an option if there was space available. That makes sense.
I can provide you with the actual numbers per se for each of the respective classes and put that in coordination with the dual language school and then place those particular numbers in each of the respective middle schools for the next 6 years that we currently have.
And now here is my other question, which is,
As a board, do we need that information?
I do
It's their
too.
choice whether they go into it or not. It's not a given that those numbers would be reflected. So to me, that's a lot of
no, but
work
that is,
put
you
on
know,
him that I don't need.
No, I
But
think
it
he's
is-
got plenty
I mean, if it's
outlined
in the
here.
5th grade, it's not a lot of number, right? So if it's 20 kids, that is the maximum of 20 that
But
can
what's the
come.
goal, like, why are you needing that information?
How many teachers am I hiring? How much money am I?
You don't know
He
that
already
because you
told
don't know
us.
what they're going to choose
No.
to do.
If you get 20 more kids, you're hiring one more teacher each, right?
But now it's their choice whether they enter the program or not if there's space. So you can't automatically assume that all 20 will go into the program.
So even if 10 want to come in, are we going to offer it to them? That's my question because, I mean, you have to be,
You would have a cap. The recommendations built for off the numbers that we see within our dual language programming.
so
And
now when you're
it's-
building a program, would you, that's what my question is, now that you're building it from ground up, how many of those kids are you going to build
Well,
it
it's
in
similar to
with?
what I asked earlier about the
Yeah.
newcomers is where's that cap for the people that didn't come up through dual language?
And generally, we try to do 75 in dual language, but the longer it goes, we know that the numbers decrease by the time they get to 5th grade, usually. People move, things of that sort. So that reduction provides some open seats, but we wouldn't, if we had more folks that wanted to enter that and required us to hire a teacher, we probably wouldn't allow that to enter. You know, the dual language kids go in, and then what available seats are there? And then we would fill those, but we wouldn't overstack the classrooms that would require crowding or an additional staff member for that.
Yes.
I wanted to say a couple things. One is I'm still really concerned about the articulation with the high school and what they're planning on doing. I think we all know I have a little bit of a hard time with things we have no control over. So
Let it go.
I can't let that go. I mean, this is
They'll adjust. They'll adjust.
Jeannie, we can't put that on them. You can't just say they'll adjust. They have a whole nother board. They have a whole nother
Right,
group of
and they
kids
will
that-
adjust
Don't
when
forget a huge
their
part of
incoming
district.
students and their
I
incoming
didn't interrupt
population
you.
is at a
I
point.
didn't interrupt
Okay.
you. They have a huge population that goes to Libertyville High School where none of those kids came up through a dual language program. Like their board and their administration is totally different. And I don't know why we can assume that they will continue this or further it. And on those same lines, I'm concerned because a lot of the research that I was able to find, in addition to what was provided by us, not only from you, but we had some parents send some stuff in, is the way to ultimately close that achievement gap is to go pre-K to 12. So if we're still stopping in 8, and Vernon Hills and Libertyville don't have a way, and Mundelein don't have a way to push this even further, are we ever closing that achievement gap? And if we're not, and that question's rhetorical for now. I don't
Right.
expect you to have an answer to that off the top of your head. But if we're not closing that achievement gap, then the value added of the resources we're putting into it are somewhat, I don't want to say washed away, but they're somewhat diminished. Full stop.
Right.
Second thought is, I don't agree with what Jeannie said as far as K-5 being a waste in dual language if this is not expanded. I think that's sending completely the wrong message to our dual language staff. It's 100% not a waste. We already see that regardless of even if it's just 12% at the middle school level, most of these kids are getting a bilingual certification. Most are going to do much better in higher level Spanish at the high school than kids that just start out in 9th grade Spanish. So I do not want to say K-5 is a waste to spend in dual language if it's not expanded. It is absolutely not a waste. Okay, I spent from 1st grade through 8th grade going to Hebrew school 3 times a week. Was not provided through my school district. We all can get bilingual opportunities outside of school, but I didn't forget how to read and write Hebrew just because I stopped in 8th grade. I can still do it even though I, admittedly, only pick it up once or twice a year.
Okay.
But I don't think you just forget that, and I don't think it's just a waste. I think it's something that you carry with you, and whether you pick it up again in high school, college, whatever, it's there. It's not a waste. I totally disagree with that.
So by what you're saying, if the high school doesn't expand their program, it won't be a waste for us to offer it in grades 6 through 8.
I'm not saying it will or won't be a waste, but what I'm saying is if they won't further it, then even if our kids go into high school above where they're going in now, if the stopping point is still the stopping point, you're going to hit the end of the tracks and now you're going to hit it in 10th grade or 11th grade instead of 11th or 12th, you're still going to end up at the same point.
There are options.
So-
You've got AP classes, you've got individual studies that can go on, you've got other classes that they'll be able to formulate.
Robin, the
If
only-
they
Right.
formulate
Right.
them.
The only thing that I can indicate to you, and part of the process of being able to work with a variety of different school districts, because our students do matriculate into 3 different schools districts, I believe, is to have those continuing conversations with those feeder districts. And you're right. Can we control those particular aspects? No, but we can provide information. We can provide opportunities to expand mutual understanding of what is occurring within each of our respective middle schools, each of the respective schools, districts. Again, the evolution that occurred within, that has occurred within, and I'll use Highland Park because it's a K-8 and then it's a separate high school district, took some time. I mean, there is opportunities and growth that occurs. I would also indicate to you that the diversity that exists within our school district is going to continue to grow.
I do not
And
disagree for 2 seconds.
Right.
with that.
and to be able to provide that opportunity now within the School of Dual Language and within our other programs, I think is beneficial and is making an impact on our students. Extending this particular program to the middle school, I believe, will make a significant impact on those particular lives. And as we move forward and continue our articulation with the high schools, what we can do is provide information, encourage, support, recruit, go for fishing trips, things of that nature. But you're right. I mean, it's a separate school
I
district.
just don't want to put the cart before the horse.
No, absolutely.
If I'd feel better if
What's the
128
worst-
were coming in here and 120 were coming in here saying, absolutely, you send them to us at a higher level, we will absolutely meet them where they are and then get them further. I'd feel better about that. I mean,
Right.
same thing, cart before the horse. I'd feel better knowing, I guess I'm having trouble picturing, we keep hearing about how there's all these space issues in the district. We especially know at Middle North, there's big space crunches. I'm having a lot of trouble picturing where we're going to be able to parcel out separate social studies classroom, separate science classroom, when we are already cramped for space if the referendum doesn't pass. So I feel like it's a little bit cart before the horse to go, let's decide this now. What if that doesn't pass? We already know we have a growing population, so even if we had a spare classroom today, population keeps growing, we're not gonna have a spare classroom in 2-3 years. So I'm a little concerned that it's cart before the horse right now.
Here's
When-
another way to look at it. If your worst case is we do such a good job that all these kids start Spanish 4 freshman year,
Mhm.
then what? Well, sophomore year, maybe they might take Chinese 1. They might
Right.
take German 1.
Or they'll take classes, they'll take classes at the local community college.
They have an extra period now
It's
in
like
high
you
school
said,
that they
yeah.
can take whatever they want to expand whatever knowledge
That's
they
true.
want
It's a
to.
good
So
perspective.
just because they cap out in freshman year doesn't mean that they stop learning on anything else.
No, I can appreciate the point of view.
On the space issue,
So go ahead.
on the space issue, as we see it going, realize that the students are going to the schools already. We're not adding.
No, you're adding separate classes.
But
Right,
you're
right,
also-
classes,
yeah,
but
you
we
need
have that
separate
number of
space, though.
students, so they're
It's
going
different.
to
Yeah, but
be
you
in
need
some
separate
classes.
space.
It's different classes. I mean, because you're going to pull 38 kids out, and I did that math.
We'll ask the
It's
administration to come up.
It's 38 kids, so you're pulling out the.
Robert Collins, 201 Hawthorne Parkway.
Yay.
You live there?
Just about.
Practical.
That's what my wife would say. I think what'll help you is it's also thinking outside the box, how we can meet some of those spatial issues is what Robert Natal and I have discussed with Mr. Abrego here when preparing for this. Like I know at Hawthorne Middle School North, we got to get out of that high school kind of, this is how we're using our rooms. So if this room isn't being used, maybe we can use that room or vice versa. Our main conversation came from the studies of science, and we do have 2 classrooms that are like mini science rooms that are fitted for a science class and a lab that's currently being, one is a writing class and the other one's a special ed class, which are pretty small classes that we could relocate to other spaces in the building, so we're really not losing that classroom space. And it works for like social studies because we do lose 2 computer labs going to our one-to-one and personalized learning. So our intent would be to utilize those spaces. And I mean, we've just been thinking about many different things, and even going to our personalized learning, it's not just what's in the circumference of your classroom, but where could we use other spaces in our building and trust our students that they're learning on their own during different times. So, and we did have that conversation, Robin, about if we do get all these additional people to move in. But I mean, that's up to the voters in April and so forth. But I mean, I think we have a good plan and a good plan of action moving forward. Unless Robert, do you have any?
No, I just agree with Robert and Steve. We are in the classroom, personalized learning and repurposing our computer lab, so.
But just a question. I'm trying to get what you're saying, and I'm trying to picture it. My head hurts. So we get back to computer labs, which makes total sense to me if we go one-to-one. That would be great if our growth were stagnant, and then you go, boom, 2 classrooms, dual language, easy peasy. We're supposed to get a projected, like, I can't remember the exact number, 300 something on the north side alone. Forget about the south side for 2 seconds, because I can't remember that number. 300 something on the north side alone. Those kids all eventually have to go through middle school. So even if those 2 computer labs are now taken up by dual language, social studies, science, whatever, if this referendum doesn't pass, where are these extra students going? On the shoulders of the current students? I mean, I'm not getting it. Like, I don't know if I'm just being thick, but I don't get it.
I think you bring up a good point, and we did. I mean, we've all conversed about that, but I think this is one of the reasons too why Mr. Obrego is making the recommendation of having just how we currently have it. Some students will go to middle school north, some students will go to middle school south. We're really not gaining those dual language students. They're already assigned to come to our schools.
But not in separate spaces.
Right, and that's why
Can't-
we've kind of discussed, like, this is how we would address the space issues. It's not the additional students. I mean, this even came up in core team when we were planning, for the future of Hawthorne School District 73. I mean, we'd have to have a heart-to-heart about what our district will look like just in case, if the referendum were not fail, or what would be a plan B or a plan C to address that. So I hope that
It's easier
answers.
with if if the referendum's supported, it's easier, obviously, because you're creating more space. In this situation, middle schools run on schedules. There are classrooms that some become available, and so a classroom that becomes available during a period might be where it might be open right now. It might be used as a classroom during that time. So that's some of the creative use you usually.
Yeah, but like, what are you gonna do? Take a social studies teacher whose classroom went to lunch and go kick her out or him out and ask them to move a different class period into that? I mean, really?
I mean, it just depends. I mean, what's really expected during that time is our teachers are collaborating in their professional learning communities, so they're really not in their rooms individually. I mean, there's times that they are, but I mean, during that planning time, the expectation is, I mean, we're talking about students and our data and how are we meeting individual needs of students. So it's just like what I kind of discussed too, of getting out of that factory model of a institutional learning and how can we be creative and think outside the box with that. I know when I taught high school before I came to Hawthorne 73, I mean, I think I had 4 or 5 different classrooms and I had to carry my stuff around me. Sometimes I thought maybe they were mad at me because I might be on the 3rd floor of the basement or 3rd floor in the basement, but you just got to be creative with that. I mean, teachers it's not their condos and they're not camping out in their classrooms. The intent is that they're meeting together and they're talking about our students.
I had a quick
We have some
question.
shared space. You know, some of the options. We're in this situation, but like Mr. Albrego, how viewing this. I know for the.
I had a question. What is your recommended class size in middle school?
The recommended, we try to be under 30.
Because I know advanced Spanish and Mr. Natal's school is running at 32, 36 or something. It's a 32.
So what I'd like to see, in order for the board to make a decision, is a total cost of the program. I think that would be important, especially having to prepare a budget for the following year.
Well, and along with the total cost, if there's any title refunding that can be allocated to offset those costs, right?
Yeah.
And what amount that would be.
And then the other thing, just my own opinion, is I think we ought to look at running the program similar to the existing program where there's a limited number of students that can be in the program. If we happen to have some that drop out, then, additional students that might want to enter could. But from a resource allocation standpoint, I think it's important for the district to know going forward how many students are going to be in this program from year to year and not have it fluctuate, especially regarding the challenges that we're going to face with staffing.
I just had a quick comment, and this is something I know you've been telling us about, resources that are available, teachers that are available, and how wonderful, we can get them from all these places. But getting resources, especially teachers, as well as curriculum, seems to be something that even in current dual language, as well as middle schools, knowing what we know. I mean, we didn't have an enrichment teacher in dual language for the longest time. I don't know if we have her this year. There was a long period of time there was no enrichment teacher because we could not find a bilingual teacher in there. So just even one teacher was hard to come by. And now we are going to, you're talking about content-specific bilingual teachers, and you're telling me it is, and I hope you're right, but I'm really, really concerned, and you can see why my concern is from there. We have 5th grade science curriculum in English, but the Spanish curriculum is not there. So I'm really concerned when you're telling me you're going to do this in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and be able to provide a curriculum which will be there. It really concerns me because from what I have seen in the past, it has not been there. My biggest concern, you get through the middle school science, you are now in honors science programs and you're eligible for them. So you're grading. I really would like to know, I would not want to get my dual language students to not be able to test into those high-level classes, which they possibly are doing right now. It really concerns me if we do not have the assessments in place, and assessments has been a biggest drawback in our dual language programming. One of the other things, our kids in advanced Spanish in middle school do not all place into the high school Spanish 3 program. They fail their placement testing because they cannot conjugate, and this is with an advanced Spanish. I really, now I'm going to expand this to 3 subjects. I'm really concerned because I know of a lot of students who had to take dual language students who landed up taking summer Spanish classes so that they could learn their conjugations and grammar so that they could get into the Spanish 3 program in high school. So I am really concerned if the expansion happens and we do not provide our kids with the resources, that they're not going to do well in high school. They do not have time to fail in high school and learn. They hit the ground running. I really want this to work the right way for our students. And I'm really hesitant with the confidence that you're telling me that all this can work. I haven't seen it work for the dual language kids for right now. I really want to be sure this will work because it hasn't. It is not working in high school. And we have this, how are they going to do for social studies? Because now you have an AP social studies class and a regular class. How are these kids going to do? How are they going to test them? Now we have them doing in translanguaging. The science classes are honest classes. They are really tough classes. And that will not change in high school. Social studies and science will not change. They will definitely have more opportunities for Spanish, but even those kids are not placing. Not all our kids are placing. So I'd really like you to relieve my hesitancy on those topics.
I have one other question. One other question. Since the program 6 through 8 would be split between the 2 middle schools, would there be any consideration regarding students entering the program originally so that there was an even number at the different middle schools, or are we going to potentially have a big fluctuation based on where the kids live and which middle school they end up going to? Is that something that you guys have
I mean, for
considered?
the past couple of years, it's been pretty even. I know, looking at next year, I mean, I think I get 47, 43 will go to middle school south, and it's about even, Stephen, when we analyze that every year.
But potentially, I guess, we might have to flip staff back and forth, or not? Or you think it'll be pretty even going forward? Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Jeannie, did you have something else?
I was just going to say that I think that, again, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for this effort and for this work. And I think that as a board, we owe it to you guys to use your expertise and your ability to fill this work that you know you're capable of doing and that is your job to do. And I think that's just thank you. And I think it's also great that you're looking at Woodstock because they had come here to get their program started and now they've continued on up through middle school and they've surpassed us. So I think it's wonderful that you're using these resources, and best of luck and keep going.
I want to thank you as well, and if the board has any questions between now and the next meeting, if you could email them to superintendent.
Quick, I guess, not really a question, quick comment. With Jeff, I mean, in terms of the cost of the program, I mean, ultimately, it's really about amount of taxpayer money to number of, students that have, the K-5 model, I mean, early intervention, I agree, it's paramount in our community, and I think, again, because it is the way moving forward, well, one other thing, I think all of our decisions are based on using money to increase student achievement. But I think we have to be sometimes really careful about talking about the achievement gap. I mean, I don't subscribe to the fact that the achievement gap is based on race. Achievement gap, if one thing has been proven to us, is the achievement gap is socioeconomic. So I can't subscribe to the fact that just because there's different races, that's why the achievement gap is. It's not the case. It's based on, so in making decisions about this is going to close the achievement gap, I can't subscribe to that. I mean, and not off the top, because the data has shown that the only factor that you can base the achievement gap is a socioeconomic, and it's not on race. So I just want to make that clear that we got to be careful when we're talking about the achievement gap when it turns to be like it's because of race. It's not because of race. So,
I don't think you said that.
well, no, it's based. It's implied that this, you know, we're doing this and we want to move to the middle school to close the achievement gap. Well, that's not really the case. You know what I mean? To close the achievement gap is a macro question. It's not just about are we more students. That's the data doesn't show that. So, but I agree with Jeff. The real question is taxpayer money given to the amount of students that it will potentially help. That's really our decision. So I do need to see all the costs. But I mean, I think the program for this district is amazing, especially in the early years. And I'm certainly, not against moving into middle schools, but like everything else, there's cost to it. But I mean, I think that's again, talk about our district being progressive. It's one of the greatest things that people who are getting this kind of growth. The fact that we have this kind of program is amazing. Those are just.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Jason, did you have a comment?
No.
Okay. Does anyone want a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay,
gonna be
just
our
5
next
minutes.
comment.
Then we'll move to the next
No
topic.
more.
Yeah, I had emailed them to you. A lot of them were from the last time. Nothing from them? Huh?
Okay.
Couple times I had a
Right. We don't get the program. They never get that language up in any grade. I would say.
They asked me if I had minutes. Nerds? Breeze or breathing? What are you there for? Cough drops.
Oi.
You were trying to
Oh, you know, when I always have like this allergy throat, it sounds so gross. But like, I was trying not to drink anymore because I needed a bathroom break. Thank you, though.
Somebody asked me.
I feel like this cookie's gonna help me, though.
Yeah,
I have
Thank
a-
you.
I have
You guys
been.
ready? You guys ready? Good job, Breaker.
I'm not sharing my cookie, though.
I felt so bad for you midway through. I'm okay. Her CPR, what does she need over there?
Oh my god.
Okay, continuing with our board meeting. I have been asked for board members to speak into the microphone because there is an
Sorry.
issue with some feedback, so
Hello?
make sure
Hi.
when you're speaking, you
I don't hear
speak
you.
I don't feel like I hear
into
me.
the microphone.
Make sure you.
Hello?
And leave it on.
Mine's
there.
on, but I don't
Yeah.
feel like I hear mine. So.
There's some
Well, there's
odd sounds
feedback. If we
coming.
turn it up too loud, it kicks back.
We're in
Okay,
touch
the-
with the sound people.
The next discussion item that we have tonight is student achievement and Human X report by Dr. Lisa Sorelli.
So a real quick introduction for you folks. This is actually rather long. It's actually a report written in a PowerPoint format, and that understanding that you're just now getting this information. Normally we provide this to you in the fall. We had many other topics in the fall.
Send it to us?
Yeah, I emailed it just, I want to say 5 o'clock,
Okay.
somewhere a little after.
Okay.
So you have that, but knowing that it's a long report, Dr. Charlie will be going through it, but if you have questions as you go through it, we'll come back again at the first meeting in March, and we can address some of those questions there as well. So if you feel like, oh, I've missed something or I didn't get a chance, we'll come back at that time, because it's, what, 83 slides?
I think so.
Yeah, so
It'll
it's more
go
like a report,
fast.
so.
Come on.
And it's a
We have
combination.
all 85 slides,
Very
right?
interesting.
No, but we have all 85 slides to
Yes.
question you
Yeah.
in March, right?
And it is a combination of two presentations. One is the academic, then the human. Usually we do those separately, and we put them together because it's data on the district.
Okay,
Dr. Sarali?
Thank you.
because if I have questions, I can write them down now.
So I am here to present some information on our assessment trends. And yes, I'll be reporting on HumanX and also the regular student achievement and growth data that I typically present on early in the fall. Obviously, we always want to start out with our mission statement, and typically this presentation is talking about high expectations for growth and achievement, but I've highlighted also that we are trying at Hawthorne to create an environment that supports joyful learning, and HumanX has a lot to do with that. It's not just about learning for our students, but HumanX also talks about how our teachers are feeling, how our staff are feeling in our buildings, and so this really does tie together nicely, these two presentations, even though it will be a little lengthy. So the purpose of assessment in general, and what we're going to be talking about all about tonight, is assessment and the fact that there's many different reasons to assess. We're talking about proficiency, growth, and understanding, determining rates of progress and formulating goals based on the data, planning for individualized instruction, programming materials, assessing our effectiveness, the effectiveness of our programming, and keeping ourselves accountable. This is applicable to both the HumanX data as well as our student achievement data. The HumanX data guides in this way for us, as for our teachers and staff. So, let's talk about HumanX first. This is a cultural assessment, and it's given to us by a third party. HumanX is the company that provides this to us. And I have up there the industry standard of the dream box, what we're looking for in terms of a percentage of staff to be highly satisfied and highly engaged in their work. And industry standard for education is 61%. So that's what we're looking for. It's high. It's good.
That's high.
Business standard is 30%, 30-ish percent. Sorry, business. We're very happy, us
Like
educators.
60% is it? Like,
No, don't. We are a standards-based district. We don't do letter grades up to the middle school. Okay,
So I
so
would get an A for 65%?
we're talking about
just the industry standard.
industry
I got it.
standard.
All right.
So what is important to note, though, is that this is a leading indicator of student growth and achievement. If we have teachers who are satisfied and engaged in their work, then we're going to have a better chance of getting our students to grow and achieve. By administering this assessment, this is a demonstration of the administration and the union working together to try to problem solve and make sure that our teachers are satisfied and engaged in their work. This is a research-based questionnaire, 88 questions. It's given online and it's done anonymously. It rates on 15 different dimensions that successful organizations exhibit, and it's on a 5-point scale, which means that the 3 is a neutral response to the statements that are provided in the 15 dimensions. A 4 or a 5 indicates strong agreement or agreement. A 1 or a 2 indicates disagreement or strong disagreement. So it's a Likert scale. We do this annually. This is our second annual administration of the HumanX data, and it's complementary to the 5 Essentials, although given a little bit differently. 5 Essentials is a biannual assessment that's given to us by the state. It's administered a little differently. That one's given to students and parents. Students at the 6th to 8th grade level, and then parents across the district. So this is a nice complement to keep us going every year to get a measure on how we're doing culturally. It gives us some clear objectives and specific information, and this particular assessment disaggregates by certified staff and support staff. So it helps us to determine, how each of those groups are doing. In talking with the administrative team, this is a good conversation starter. So by getting this data, they're able to talk to their staff and individuals in the building about how they can do better as a building, and provides the entire staff the opportunity to take ownership of the culture of the building, and then for us, the culture of the district. And the process of the debrief of this information, so far it's been with members of the HumanX staff, is for the entire staff to listen to the data and to take it in, and then to talk about what action steps they can take to improve the culture of each of their buildings. So this is about ownership. This is about owning the fact that we are all a part of not only our buildings, but also of Hawthorne District 73, and that we all have a piece in how we work together and create an environment of collegial partnership and collaboration. We did have a significant increase in the number of people who took the survey this year, which is good, and is probably a result of the fact that they saw changes happen based on the data we got from the first administration. So we saw a significant improvement in that. And we also moved the timeline to late October from late September, because we felt like we wanted to give people a little bit of opportunity to get the year started before they took the survey. So this is all staff for the district. We had 414 staff members take it this year. And we had a pretty good number. 73% of our staff are highly engaged and highly satisfied. This is certified and support together. So that's a good number for our dream box.
What is our total number of staff certified and support?
So that's a good question. But the total numbers were in the schools. And so I think we're at about high 80s, 80%, 80s to 90% of staff that took it.
About 575, is that right, Lynn? Oh, certified and
Because if
you're talking about just our teachers and our instructional assistants?
No,
took it,
support staff.
including all secretaries and.
I'll give the
building staff?
percentages of the
Yeah.
participation by building, so you can have an idea of where we are. There's some buildings that are lower.
But it's somewhere around the 525 to 560 range, I believe is the
Okay.
number. I think we have like three.
But so this 414 is our teachers, our office administration, and instructional assistants, everybody.
Yes.
And even office staff, administrative assistants, support staff is all included in there. So the numbers far to the left just indicate the question number for the survey. then these are the actual statements that they're provided with. These are the top 5 responses for the district. So these are the statements to which we got the most degree of agreement. And then far to the right is the mean for those questions across the district, and then the what do they call them? The dimension. So pride, engage, and inspire. So questions are grouped under these bigger ideas. So you can see that our staff are feeling pretty committed. They're proud of the work that they're doing. They're always seeking to improve, which is great. Innovation, from when I sat in on a debrief 2 years ago, innovation is not necessarily one of those dimensions that shows up highly in education, because sometimes they don't have an opportunity to innovate. But our teachers have always felt strongly that they have that opportunity, and then that people feel satisfied in their personal roles. Our bottom 5, and let me clarify, there are always a bottom 5. So you can't get away from the fact that there's always going to be 5 that end up at the bottom. But what we're looking at is the mean. We're in the neutral area for each of these, so we're not in a disagree state with any of these bottom 5. And you can see that some of these have to do with personal coaching, some of them have to do with communication. And then the one that we decided to work on, which is highlighted in yellow, is about the training and the just right training that people are provided for their specific roles in the organization. So I highlighted that in yellow because you'll see for all of the schools when I present that information, each school has determined what their focus is going to be in terms of the data that they got back. For us as a district, that was one of them. But before I get to the action steps for training that we took, this is, remember, 15-16 data. Some of the other things that we've done to address the HumanX data as a district, one is some coaching for our administrative team. We've talked a lot about the dual language audit that we've worked with the IRC and Paridad, which is another organization that's helped us with instruction at the dual language school. That organization, as well as ECRO, which is our research consulting firm, have provided individual coaching to our administrative team on data analysis and instruction. So in terms of providing personal coaching, we're trying to go for that with our administrative team to give them some support with the individual data that they're seeing at their building. We know in our strategic plan, communication is one of the big things that we've been working on. And so these are some of the ways that we've tried to increase communication across the district, specifically for our staff. We have utilized Facebook. Karen Maturo, who's our coordinator of professional development, has a Facebook page for new teachers, but that's opened up to all staff, where she shares not only articles and professional development, but also events that occur, pictures from events, and try to keep everyone in the loop. Nick Brown, Superintendent Nick Brown, has a Twitter account. So if you're interested in following him, I think you have, a grand total of how many right now? 30, 40?
What, followers?
Yeah.
Oh. They may say 1, but they're 10 behind.
That's right.
I
We know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge. It's getting huge.
But we did, if I can, I did ask, and Karen and her coaches have created a Twitter for any parents, or a Twitter for parents that gives, it's just brand new, and you'll start seeing it get advertised in our Hawthorne highlights and on the webpage, but it is to give parent tips, and we hope to have that every day going with some parent tips, so we are trying that as well.
Some other things, we've created our HPC facilitators, created a newsletter that supports communication back from that leadership team to the building levels. That's been very helpful for staff. Our early release days, we talked about a little bit, that we have started many of our early release days with a video that has a common message for all teachers that addresses the work that's going to be happening in those 2 hours, so that everyone hears the same thing before they start their work. That's been very supportive as well. And then we continue with the tradition of listening tours, and the latest installments have had to do with professional development and also with our core planning for our facilities master plan, which these are good vehicles.
Lisa, what is
Paridad is it's an independent organization run by a couple of members of the IRC. It's just an offshoot of that. So we talk about John Hilliard and some other people from the IRC. He's also involved in this other organization, but that's where he's been providing the coaching through.
And is it specific for dual language? Is that
Second language learners?
so
Yep.
it's specific?
Bilingual education, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
But-
just going to make a request, just because of the length of the presentation. If board members could write down your questions, hold them till the end, we can go back and have them answered. But the likelihood with 75 more slides is
I'm
that a lot of them
moving.
will be answered
No,
during
but
the
this was just to
present.
help
I know.
explain.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But our big area was providing the right training. And so what you see on the slide right now are all the different ways that we have tried to engage in giving personalized and individualized professional development to all members of our staff. What you're going to see here is that we've done surveys. We've created expert lists by trying to incorporate the trainer's model, trying to get people comfortable with stepping outside and providing collegial coaching even. PD listening tours. Karen has sat with both of our instructional coaches in the lounge of each building during specific times to ask, just what can we do to support you, and gathering information that way. Brochures have been created just to kind of jazz up the communication a little bit. The first year teaching sessions, which incorporate which are having to do with induction, are now being offered to all staff. So those are on the main meetings calendar. We've had some increased participation with that. We've brought in members of the Regional Office of Education to help us with our peer review process and the curriculum, but also to sit with individual teams to talk about data, specifically with regard to ELA, math, and science and social studies, actually all areas they've helped us with. We've had 3 trainings for our instructional assistants this year, specifically targeted towards their needs and what they've communicated to us in terms of what they're looking for. Our 2 coaches, Lauren Boardman and John Reed, have been engaging in coaching cycles with teachers who volunteer to go through a coaching cycle where they would set a goal, have some observation time, be provided with some resources, and then track their data throughout the course of a 6 to 8 week coaching cycle with both John and Lauren, which has been really, really powerful and successful. Obviously, you know that we've been focusing choice PD sessions for the Personalized Learning Initiative that's coming to the middle schools. There's some online classes that have been offered this year. There's a new YouTube channel for PD in-house. So teachers really can get professional development kind of anywhere, anytime. And then we've been encouraging staff when they go to an outside conference to come back then and share that information either at a faculty meeting or with Karen so she can get that information out in another way. So these are some of the action steps as a district that we've taken. This slide indicates the percent of highly engaged and highly satisfied certified staff by building. The first percentage is the percent in the dream box. The second percentage is the percent of staff who took the survey in that building. Okay? So you can see those percentages there. And then our support staff.
And a quick calculation that doesn't work on here, but I believe we have roughly about 335 certified, about 175 non-certified. It's about 510. There's roughly about an 81% participation rate. We'll verify that number, but off the top of my head, it's about an 81% participation rate.
So certified is only teachers, right? The instructional assistants and everybody else goes into support staff? Okay.
Yes. The dual language support staff survey has an NA because only one person took it, so we don't do a report on that one person because obviously it'd be easy to identify that information. So in each of the schools, then we have a top 5 again and a bottom 5 in each school. And what I've highlighted here are what the staff decided they would be working on as a focus to try to improve the culture and climate in each building. And then I'm going to outline some action steps. So Aspen Elementary is looking at their primary dimensions of strength being innovation, pride in their work, and being inspired to kind of do the best they can for their students. The ones they're working on are talking about support and equipment, which has to do with materials and training, and then communication. And there's some in here about the hiring process and the feeling that maybe, there's not people not in the right fit having to do with that. They've chosen, or they did choose, to work on materials and equipment and training specific to Aspen. So there's been an increase in reporting opportunities from various groups. So talking about HBC, school leadership teams, some different areas that they can have articulation between the groups. Specific to Aspen, additional professional development opportunities were offered with a focus on understanding and map reports. ReadyGen was an ELA pilot that was done at Aspen Elementary. We didn't move forward as a district in terms of scaling it up, but to support them through that pilot, we offered some additional training. Obviously, we know they're still working with a Glasser philosophy. EET is an expanding expression tools, which was designed by one of the speech and language pathologists at Aspen. She's provided some additional training there. Again, just trying to target what they're looking for specifically at Aspen. And then Bill has been working specifically with the school leadership team to address staff being able to feel recognized for their work. That's definitely something that we've seen across the district in the first 2 administrations of the survey, is that people are feeling like maybe they aren't receiving recognition for their hard work. The way it's worded in the survey is I have received meaningful recognition within the last 10 days. And so many of our schools have that in there and have worked specifically to make sure that not only are staff being recognized by their administrator, but also by each other. So in faculty meetings or other opportunities, they're given that opportunity to kind of give a pat on the back or shout out. At Lincoln, you can see that, again, pride and innovation, inspiration are in those top dimensions, but also relationships. And then the areas that they've chosen to work on have to do with establishing kind of a closer relationship with their administrator. And in this case, that would be Carol Bennett, because she is the one that is housed there as the principal at the Lincoln School. And so the action steps relating to the administrator at Lincoln have to do with Carol. But on top of that, and there's some planning in the works with how we can kind of increase the communication and support from Carol to all of the teachers at Lincoln. There have been some improvements to how the pre-K and EC teams are working together, where we've kind of tried in the past to separate those programs out. We're trying to get them together now and planning curriculum, meeting together, planning activities not only for staff, but also for students and families. And they are also have become a more active part of the screening team instead of just scoring. So now they're actually getting to know their students before they're being placed into the classroom. So again, just trying to involve those teachers together as teams, and then also in the early assessment of their students. At the School of Dual Language, you're starting to see kind of a pattern here. Our teachers are definitely feeling proud of their work, inspired. They're really dedicated to what we're doing at Hawthorne, which is great to always see that in the top 5. In the bottom 5, and again, we're seeing some of these scores below the 3 mark, but many of them are still within that neutral range. Dual Language has decided to work on training as one of those action steps to improve the climate and culture. And we know that Dual Language has been doing a lot of work with personalized professional development towards addressing the needs in the audit. But on top of that, James has tried to increase the amount of time that he spent with individuals as well as teams going over their data. And we heard 2 weeks ago that they've had an increase in the amount of data that they're looking at. So these team meetings have become important to meet with James and talk about what they're seeing in terms of the growth of their students. There are task forces at the School of Dual Language, small subcommittees that involve all the faculty members that are trying to address the needs. One is a resource committee, one is on biliteracy, one is on recruitment. So they're trying to address specifically the needs of that building, and that work continues to try to keep everyone involved, and then they report out, which improves communication. James has instituted weekly and biweekly meetings with his first and second year teachers, again, to touch base and make sure they're feeling supported and their needs are being met. And then obviously, we heard 2 weeks ago how much work the staff is doing to respond to the audit and to incorporate some of those new instructional strategies that we outlined a couple weeks ago. At Elementary North, again, we're seeing in the top 5, very proud, very inspired, very dedicated at Elementary North. And the bottom areas that they've chose to work with have to do with, again, training and then spending some quality time with Katie. So the Elementary North action steps, I hope she's smiling back there. Good. Okay, so they've worked to develop a welcoming process that's a little bit more personalized for new staff as they enter the building. There's some instructional assistants that come and go in that building, or we add instructional assistants, and so we see the pictures. They come up by email so you can see their face and welcome them in the building. There have been some increased opportunities, again, for that recognition, to get staff working together to support each other. Instituting some choices for how staff might spend their faculty meeting in terms of learning some new skills. Again, trying to just differentiate that PD and the time they're spending together. She and Megan have worked on expert lists with tips, book study groups to address the needs specific to that building. So those are some of the action steps at Elementary North. At Elementary South, same thing, pride, inspiration, and a commitment to quality education, which is great. And at Elementary South, we're again working on materials and equipment. So Jill and Christy have been working with a specific professional development community or committee at Elementary South, and they sent out a survey specifically to their staff to get an idea of what it is that they're looking for so that they can provide that professional development to do their jobs with the most support. And then they also were looking at developing an in-house expert list so that they could build off each other's knowledge and share that information across the district. At Townline, relationships is a top one over there. People are feeling like they have some friends at work, and we all know that helps when you are comfortable with the people you're working with. At Townline, again, we're looking at materials and training. So Vicki has instituted some intentional opportunities again for recognition during faculty meetings, staff connecting with each other to try and find ways to support each other in all aspects of what they're doing at school. There's a book club happening at Townline, and more regular and intentional articulation between grades. I know that she's had different grades get together to articulate vertically about not only curriculum but scheduling and those kinds of things. So just getting the communication to be more robust and complete at Townline. Middle School North, some great top ones here. So a commitment to quality and excellence, pride. Some shout outs to Robert and Jim about the administration over there. In the bottom, we're looking again at training, and we have some issues with how we're selecting people, and this has to do mainly with the screener. We have an online screener that we use when people apply for a job at Hawthorne, and this is a new process for us. It helps us because we are a very attractive district, and we get a lot of applicants for every job opening if it's not a hard-to-fill position. You know, when we're talking about core content or elementary positions, we get a lot of applications here. And so when you're going to find those applicants that you want to have to bring in and have a face-to-face or a fit interview, this online screener has really helped us to determine what are the most quality candidates that we can bring back so that we can screen through and choose the right people. But again, with any new process, there's always questions about, you know, how that's working. So some action steps at Middle North, book studies, and they are specifically looking at, Lou, to address your comment about the achievement gap. They're specifically looking at how to address the needs of students in poverty, because we do know that that's a main factor for the achievement gap. We also do know that many of our students belong to more than one subgroup. And so we have students who are Hispanic, speak a second language, who also belong in that students in poverty. And so we're trying to address both of those things to make sure that we close the achievement gap. And then looking specifically at differentiation strategies for those students. And then again, looking at that issue of recognition, staff recognizing each other, opportunities for the administration to do the same. At Middle South, again, pride, inspiration, innovation, and in this one, setting goals for themselves and kind of making sure that teachers are doing what we're asking our students to do, which is setting a goal and improving every year. In the bottom items for Middle South are communication, and again, that training issue. And with the communication one, it's sort of like feeling in on things. So just making sure that everyone's communicated to about all the things that are happening within the district and then within the building. So Rob and Jamie have collaborated with their leadership team on recognition, and they've specifically asked the staff, how do you want to be recognized? Because as a district, we've had that conversation. Meaningful recognition could mean something totally different to Jeannie than it does to Jeff. I mean, we know that some people like to be publicly recognized and some people don't. And so part of the work that Middle South did was to actually reach out and say, what is meaningful to you? And how can we address that need specifically for the building? And then working with some outside agencies like Chili's and Horace Mann. Horace Mann's been a great support to us, providing some incentives not only for students, but also for staff recognition. And then have instituted a special breakfast for their instructional assistants and support staff, just to kind of make sure that they're feeling valued. So as a district, I would emphasize that we're continuing to stay focused on our strategic plan, our mission and vision, and that we have been working to become more consistent in our processes and procedures across the district. That's a good thing. Also been working to become more transparent. But what you'll hear in the next portion of the presentation, which has to do with achievement and growth, our teachers are working really hard and our administrators are working really hard. And with any change, any new change or any new initiative that comes across, it causes a level of discomfort, and there causes a need for support and there causes a need for recognition and more communication. And so although we have those items in the bottom 5, we have those things that we're trying to work on, I would suggest that it's just because our staff is working very hard to try to address the many different things that we've been doing at Hawthorne to improve our system and to become more consistent across our buildings. So I think this is really good information for us. Our administrative team is grateful to have this information, and we've been formulating our school improvement goals around some of this and really making sure to incorporate it in lots of different ways. So if there are any big questions on the HumanX data, we can take a pause here before we move into
I have
achievement.
one big question. Where's the special ed department in this?
Incorporated within each building.
Within each building?
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be, is there a way we can move it out? Because considering we had the audit, we would like to see what their satisfaction level would be.
It's an anonymous survey, and it's important that it's anonymous
No, I
because,
completely understand.
So when you talk about special education staff, even within a building, you're narrowing down to a really small subset of the population. One of the things that teachers really like about this survey is that there's not a really good way to identify who's saying what. We do have other mechanisms to determine whether or not we're being effective when we address the audits, to follow up and monitor our progress. I don't know that this is going to be the one that's going to give us that information. The way that HumanX does it, they want to keep it consistent because then they feel like their results are reliable and they can compare them to other standards because they're administering them in the same way. So,
And I had another question. What is the percent of response would you think viable? Because at some places it's like about 36%, and that's a pretty low number.
36% of staff participating?
Yeah,
I didn't think we had one that was that low.
it's a support staff, which is 36%.
Oh, support staff. Yeah, those are much smaller numbers.
So what is the percentage that you want? 64%? Is that?
We're looking for as high as we can get it. So every year we're trying to encourage people. We've had, most of the buildings have offered time during faculty meetings to have staff actually sit and just fill it out or take the time to do it. Unfortunately, support staff are not there for that. And so we encourage as much as we can to get them to fill out the survey. Sometimes
I hate to say it, but from my limited knowledge of marketing through my husband being a marketing director, it's actually a pretty reliable survey return. 36%.
36%, yeah.
Not
With a
ideal
small
as
number of
far-
people.
It's not as reliable as a 60 or 70% return, obviously, but it's actually a statistically significant return on that.
Lynn has shared with me that we had 325 certified and 100 non-certified staff.
So 325 certified and
100 non-certified.
3. And do we know what, I mean, Middle North is just out of the park. So, I mean, this is great. I mean, thank you, Mr. Collins and Mr. Sisiwa. So do we know what is it that they are doing that we can replicate?
Yes, we
Can
talk
pick
about
their
that a lot.
brain?
We talk about that. I mean, we talk about that a lot at administrative level.
Clone them?
We share, and honestly, I would say we have a tremendous group of administrators in this room right now. Robert and Jim, they're amazing, but all of our administrators are working really
They're
hard.
better than others. Right now, I'm looking at the numbers.
But I will say that we do share, and our administrative team is just like a PLC that we would have with our teachers. And they're constantly coming together and going, wow, how did that happen with you and what did you do? And a lot of this is a result of that sharing. We're continuing to learn. But I would say that every school is like every classroom, which is a different set of teachers, a different set of needs, a different set of experience. People coming from different places to come together and do this work. So I cannot overemphasize the work that's been done that's different in each building to address the different needs of each of our buildings. And they're all coming from different places. So yes, we do share. I mean, we consider ourselves a PLC, our administrative team, and we're very open about asking those questions and being critical friends to each other. And yes, shout out to Robert and Jim. It's very good data.
I realize too, sometimes where you see a lower percentage, now, and I don't know, but we have a relatively young staff compared to what we had 5 years ago because of the retirements. So a staff member that's out on a maternity leave may not take it, even though they're invited to, and the person that's sitting in their space may not take it.
No, I understand.
Right,
I just
so
want to
that,
know
that
what
could be
it-
some fluctuations in those, but
I
we
mean,
do try to
some
provide
of
them
them
the
are
time.
big, some of
Right,
them are,
right.
negligible. So I just wanted to know.
I had a couple broad questions here. Are there any parts to the survey that HumanX provides that we're choosing not to ask? Like, are there any broad categories of questions? Because I'm curious if there would be something we could ask about whether staff feels fairly compensated for what they're adding. And then you said one thing that sort of turned one of the understandings I had in my head around. You mentioned Aspen still being a Glasser theory school. I thought we did away with that during reorganization. I understand you can't untrain that from the teachers, but like I thought we were supposed to all be following the same model now. So I'm wondering why would we be putting money towards Glasser professional development?
Glasser is still a part of the Aspen culture. I mean, we still have families and parents there that have been there for years. And so to support that continued development is important in terms of a common vocabulary for Aspen right now. We just had a parent curriculum committee meeting where we talked about the investigations that we're doing into SEL and social emotional learning across the district. For a while there, we had very, very different buildings with the very different philosophies. Choice was an option for people. Now that we're coming together and trying to provide some more consistency, we're looking across the district to have a universal resource for social emotional learning. Glasser fits into that category. But as a district, that's a decision that we have to make moving forward. And Bill and I have talked a lot about, during the reorganization, how are we going to address, because it's not something you just drop. I mean, that is a philosophy that's been involved there for a long time.
You don't just drop it, but to put further PD towards it is a whole nother issue than just dropping it. Like I said, I understand you can't untrain the teachers or undo the culture, and I get that. But at this point, the only people that chose that as a model are in 4th and 5th grade, those families.
And
maybe
we've
a few
had new
scattered
staff.
siblings.
And we've had new staff into those teams and new staff into, support services that work with those teams. And it's really, really important for everyone to understand what's happening in each of the classrooms. And when you have anyone that integrates new into a culture, you've got to have that common vocabulary. You're going to really run into roadblocks. So when we talk about PD, that's important. It's important for them to maintain it until the district makes a decision on something universal if we decide to move away from that.
Right. I guess my notion was the district had made a decision. That was my understanding after that entire year-long reorg process.
That was
But
not my
anywho,
understanding.
the other big question I had, which now I am forgetting. Great. I thought I'd written it down, but I must not. Go on without me.
I had one big question. On all of the bottom of all this HumanX survey, training and development, support equipment, and career development is the bottom 3. We spend a lot of resources on that as time, the 6 days, half days that we give people, the technology budget that we have. This really concerns me.
One, I would remind you that there's always going to be a bottom 5, like I said
doesn't
before.
matter. It's 3 consistent all schools across.
The other thing I would say is, and Nick and I have had this conversation, if any of us are asked, do we have exactly the right material and exactly the right training to do our jobs right all the time? I think all of us would say at some point, we haven't had exactly what we needed. Needs change every year for students. Kids come into classrooms that have different needs and challenges. Teachers are always needing additional support. Materials has been an issue, but has come and gone based, on the fact that we've invested some more in curriculum. Early release days have been very positive in terms of the feedback. I think that when we're asking people, do you have exactly what you need to do every day? Do you have exactly the right answers all the time for the 25 to 27 kids in your classroom? I think teachers would always say they can use more support. They can use more differentiated instruction. I mean, we have specialists who maybe don't have a coworker in the building. They might be the only one that's working in the building. And so for them to get time with a team in another building is hard. And so for them to have personalized professional development is a goal for us, and we're working on it, but it's hard to accomplish all the time, giving people exactly what they need all the time. and when they need it. The other thing I would say is that sometimes when you drill down into this data, it's not about the content of the training. It's about when it's available. You know, people have other commitments. They might not want to come after school unless they're being compensated. They might not want to come during a planned time because they might have something else happening. There are other things that go into the right training. It's not necessarily what's available. It could be when it's available, and it might not be available at the right time for them. And obviously, we can't offer everything all the time. So what I would say on that big, long list of things that we've tried to do to provide personalized professional development is just what we would say to a teacher when they're saying, we want you to differentiate all the time for all of your students. It's a difficult task. It's a tall order. So I think none of us are surprised, and HumanX would say the same thing. These are ones that consistently end up in the bottom because everyone can find a time when they haven't had exactly what they were looking for at the time.
What it has done is generated, like last year and then this year, it generates the conversation where we're able to say, all right, if we're providing this, what else it may be missing, or how can we better serve you with the training or the resources? So yes, the early release days are very valuable to us, but so folks may not be thinking of that when they answer that question. They're thinking about what they may not have or what was difficult for them to access. So it starts that conversation in the buildings with the principals, and the principals bring it to us when we have AT meetings, and then we talk about what are we finding out now that is needed, or what have we missed? Is there something that we've missed, or we need to try to do? So we're continuing to try to.
The other thing is us defining what professional development is. We've been working on a curriculum for a few years here, and that is professional development. Looking at standards and looking at creating assessments and articulating with your colleagues is professional development, but sometimes it's not branded that way. We talk about it as furthering our curriculum. We talk about it as building this guaranteed and viable piece. We see it as professional development. Many of our teachers see it as professional development, but when you're looking at training, that might not be the first thing that comes to mind. So part of it is also us communicating this idea that professional development is broader than just training on a system or training on a piece of software, but that part of it is that too.
Is there anything similar to HumanX that we could be doing to sort of separate out people's feelings about their individual building versus central administration?
I would say that
even with some of these, it's hard to categorize exactly where that's coming from.
yeah, and that's where the debrief is nice, because when you get to meet with the buildings and the teachers get to actually sit in the room and process, okay, this is the score we got, this is what we said for the building, people can kind of at that point say, well, this is what I was thinking when I answered that question. Many of the ones that start with Hawthorne District 73 or have Hawthorne 73 in there, people would interpret as under the bigger umbrella of the district and not their school. But again, the purpose of this whole thing is to gather ownership and to make sure that everyone feels like we're all part of all of those communities. So the separation is nice to create the goals and to have the conversation, but part of the ownership of this is that we all belong to this district and that we all need to take ownership in both of those pieces.
And I appreciate that collaborative effort. I think in those debriefing sessions, you lose the anonymity, which is the beautiful piece of
A little bit.
And I'm just curious, when I hear not provided the right training, do they feel like they're not provided the right training by central administration, professional development department, or are they feeling like their principal's not going to bat for them? Or they, I would like to sort of, in an ideal world, parcel that out and figure out, where they feel like it's coming from, since this survey in all of its glory does not have a comment section.
No, but I would suggest that when we talk about the surveys that we've sent out to staff, have had multiple opportunities for staff to provide anonymously, this is what I need.
Okay.
And have an open-ended, just, what can we give to you to help and support? And, when would be the right time, and how can we brainstorm together to do that? So yes, the anonymity is gone a little bit, but at the same time, in order for us to provide you with the right training, we have to know who you are and what you want. And so as professionals, that's part of it too, is how do we get comfortable having those conversations? Because we'll never move forward in a completely anonymous environment. We have to be open enough to kind of share that so that we can address whatever concerns are out there.
A bigger question, we've done this for 2 years now. Do you think this is the best survey for our district? Are you comfortable with it? Do you think this is a good benchmark? Is it something we should go looking for something different?
I think right now it is. I think I'd like to give it another 2 years. We have 4 years of data and see how it progresses. The first year we took it, we saw different numbers than we saw. We have more students. I did the quick calculation off the numbers that Brad gave, so about 97% of folks are taking the survey. And our rate numbers that you can see in some of the reports I've given you, if they go up, they stay the same, or they have gone down. So I think you need to let it run for another 2 years and then see how that's informing us. The big key is how do we use this information? If we get it and we go, oh, look at that, those are the bottom 5, those are the top 5, and we put it on the shelf, we've done ourselves a disservice. What we're doing is we actually use this information to determine what else do we need. That's what's has instigated many of the changes, or the more personal or one-to-one approach to professional development for our staff, asking where they need. Our HPC group actually plans the early release days. They help plan the PD, so gaining more stakeholders within the district in that planning to determine how and when they need those materials. So I think that it's good for us right now, and it's sort of the first time we've used what I call a culture survey as part of our strategic plan to improve our culture. So we are going at it this route and getting some gauge on where we're at. Our numbers sort of in that dream box are getting stronger, and we hope to continue that. So I think it is. I think 2 more years, and then we can see how that's informing us and see if we need to move along. But it's only the second year. I wouldn't want to give it up after the second year.
I think the other part to remember, this will be a nice segue into the part 2, is that the point of giving that survey is to make sure that teachers have what they need so they can do what our students need them to do. And so ultimately the bottom line for all of this is, are people getting what they need in order to support students in terms of student achievement and growth? And that's the bottom line for any culture survey, 5 essentials, anything like that, is that the ultimate end of the conversation is, how are our students doing? So with that, I'll segue to assessment of achievement and growth. So this is our map. It's a little hard to read, but these are all the universal assessments that we give K-8. The areas in yellow are areas that are under review. So the reason I'm putting this out there is that we continually try to review our assessment map and make sure that we're giving the right assessments to get the right information, and we can sometimes make adjustments to that. For example, we have been giving MAP K-8 for the last few years, fall, winter, and spring as a universal screener. We've heard for the last couple of years that kindergarten teachers would say the fall and winter MAP scores of a kindergarten student are a little bit unreliable, when our little ones come in, and that it's not giving us the best data having them sit in front of a computer. So we gave it for a couple years to see how it was going, and this year I've kind of decided this was the last time we're going to do fall and winter, but we will stick with spring so that their first test is not fall of first grade. So we feel like they have an opportunity to engage with that assessment at the end of kindergarten, but then that first assessment in first grade would be where we would look at it. So that's an example of an area that we're going to be modifying moving forward. We're also in talks about the end of 8th grade MAP assessment. We are past high school placement by the time we do the spring MAP assessments. It's something that's not utilized. They typically use the winter scores for any kind of placement decisions. And anyone who's lived with an 8th grader in the spring knows that they might not be totally engaged in that spring assessment. And so we've heard that, and we're still talking about that one, because programmatically it's nice for us to have that end piece of data at the end of 8th grade. So we're still talking about that as an administrative team. We'll talk about F&P a little bit and the administration that of that assessment and how we're trying to look at adjustments to that. We're taking out some of the Ames Web assessments that we've been doing. We've been doing phoneme segmentation fluency as a benchmark in kindergarten and first grade, and it's not a piece of data that we've been using a lot. So we're going to be taking that out of the rotation as a benchmark, but then as students move into the tiers for RTI, that might be something that we would utilize. And then we are also going to be discontinuing the kindergarten screener for incoming kindergartners starting with this fall. And the reason for that is that, and the board got some information about this earlier, was that we collect all that information in lots of different ways already. And to do a screening of a kindergartner in the spring, and I live with a 4-year-old right now, who changes every day. From spring to fall, there can be huge growth for a student. And so what we would gather in the spring might not even be accurate by fall. And the indicators that we use to place students and create balanced classes are things that we gather in other ways. So these are examples of how we're trying to kind of minimize the formal assessments to get the maximum amount of information, because we assess all day long. Our teachers would tell you this is nowhere near the assessment map that occurs within a classroom. This is just the formal assessments. So what we're talking about today are common assessments, and the reason that that we're talking about the common assessments is because it gives us an indication of how we're doing programmatically. We can look at a norm, and we can make determinations about our programming and instruction. We can determine our effectiveness in a lot of different areas and for specific groups of students. Supports our embedded professional learning. And so not only are we looking at HumanX to determine our professional development, we're also designing a lot of based on what we're seeing here in the data, and then our improvement over time. So we look at these data in a lot of different ways, and we're going to take a look today at an overview of all the different ways that we look at the data. But basically, we're trying to find out what our assessments are telling us. So let's start with Park. So this is a report on the second administration of Park, which was different than the first administration. So the first administration, if you remember, included a performance-based assessment and an end-of-the-year assessment, and those two things were aggregated together to give us a score for each student and for the school. Well, by the second year, which was last year, they had done away with the performance-based assessment, and the end-of-year assessment was shifted back to March. So we're looking at more of an ISAT-ish timeline, okay? So the second administration of Park was pretty different than the first administration. I don't want to say it's a new baseline. We're going to look at a few trends, but they were really different in terms of those tests. It is 100% aligned with our standards. It's administered in English, online, with limited accommodations as needed for IEP and LEP students. We went through this a couple weeks ago that our district level data looks good in comparison to the state. It hasn't changed much, though, in the 2 years. So the 2015 data is below, and then this year's data, or last year's, I'm sorry, is above. It looks fairly similar. And then again, just as a reminder for the community, all of this information is available online, and anyone can go ahead and query the Park data kind of any way that they choose. So there are some progress indicators here as a district, and all of this information is available by school as well. And then what we'll be talking about a little bit tonight, and what we've been talking about, is the subgroup comparison. So knowing that the state holds us accountable for making sure that all of our subgroups are achieving at high levels, these are the reports that are available to us for this particular assessment. So you have 15 and 16 data right next to each other. You can query all the different achievement gap comparisons that the state finds valuable, which are low income versus non-low income, black, white, Hispanic, black, Hispanic, male, female, and IEP versus non-IEP. Some of these are more relevant to us than others, just considering the size of our subgroups. We're fairly consistent with the state in terms of gender achievement gap. But this is basically what we're looking at, ELA and math.
And which ones are the most?
We definitely see our highest gaps in low income versus non-low income and Hispanic white, IEP and non-IEP as well. These are areas that we see our largest gaps. And again, I showed this to you a little bit 2 weeks ago, but there are ways to look at how we compare to other schools in the state in terms, or other districts in the state in terms of our population, our specific population. So this particular graph, these are the scatter plots. Going across the side is the performance levels, so percent meeting and exceeding standards according to Park, and then along the bottom is, in this case, the percent of low-income students. So this is us. These are the rest of the districts in Illinois. So you can kind of get an idea of where we stand in comparison to other districts with similar numbers of low-income students. And then you can query that any way you want. So generally speaking, we outperform the state in terms of reading and math on this particular assessment. We see similar achievement gap information. These are areas that we're struggling with and that we focus a lot of our professional development on. Let me get back to my presentation here. So, although I just talked about the fact that we wouldn't really want to look at trend data considering the PARCC assessments were pretty different, the two administrations, we can look a little bit. So these are two charts looking, and I know the board had asked last week or 2 weeks ago about some cohort data. This is about the extent of which we can get for 2 years. And the colors indicate the cohorts. On the left, you have percent meeting in 15 and 16, and on the right, you have percent exceeding in 15 and 16. Generally speaking, where we see a decrease in the percentage of students meeting with the cohort, we see an increase in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding. So we're seeing those kids shift over, which is good. ELA is on the top, and then math is on the bottom. Again, these are the subgroup comparisons that the state values that we're looking at for the district.
Can you explain one of them?
Sure.
Kind of anyone.
Oh, any one of them, sure. So low income, non-low income. So the green is us, and the top bar is the percent of non-low income students that are meeting or exceeding standards. The bottom bar is the percent of low income students meeting or exceeding standards. The green is us, the blue is the state. So while their achievement gap is smaller, 30 points as opposed to our 40 points, you can see that the non-low income students, we have far more of non-low income students meeting or exceeding standards than the state. And we also have a few more low income students, just a few. So the gap here is bigger because the ceiling is higher at Hawthorne, if that makes sense.
One that's striking is if you look to your right where it says summary for ELA black and white, you see our bottom bar is as high as the top bar for the state. So that kind of gives you an idea why they're performing better.
And when we've talked about addressing the achievement gap, one of the challenges that we have is that we don't want to reduce the achievement gap by bringing the ceiling down. We want to push all students forward. And so that's the challenge, making sure that all students are challenged appropriately. You see that with our Hispanic white information as well, and the non-IEP and IEP. Any questions on this one? So these are just trends overall, not by grade, just by subgroup, percent meeting and percent exceeding 15 and 16, and then 15 and 16 again for ELA and math. Generally speaking, they're similar from both administrations of PARCC. So we're not gathering a whole lot of information about how we did on the second year of this assessment. Not much of a change. However, PARCC is providing us with better reports for us to look at how we're doing. So this is an example of a report that we're getting out of this assessment that we never got out of the ISAT. And this is new as of last year. So this is a sample of an evidence statement analysis. So along the bottom, you can see the standards. Actually, all the questions in the PARCC test broken out by standard. On the left are the most difficult standards, and on the right are the least difficult standards. We're the green dot. This is 7th grade math. So we're the green dots. The blue squares are the state information, and then the red triangles are the cross-state or the consortium. So any state that's giving the PARCC assessment would be included in the red triangle. And as you can see, some of the standards then were right on par with the state. So these statements or these reports were sent out to teams, and teams were asked to analyze, where do you see this in your curriculum? Where are these standards? Are they not addressed until after we give the PARCC test, which could be the case? And if they are, do we need to make an adjustment so that we make sure that we're instructing before the PARCC test, or is it something that we just need to look at in our curriculum?
There was a report that some questions weren't asked on it.
Yeah, so in some of these, their green dots are all the way at the bottom, and it doesn't mean that we haven't taught it. It means that there are different forms of the PARCC test, and some of the forms have questions on some standards and not on others. And so we just didn't get measured on those. But these are available for the whole district, each grade, ELA and math, all schools each grade within the school, ELA and math. So these have been very, very helpful for teams when they're looking at their curriculum to determine whether or not there are any gaps or areas that they need to address before the next PARCC assessment. So while the data comes a little bit late for us, it's starting to become a little bit more instructionally supportive for our teachers and teams, especially in terms of alignment with curriculum.
So you get this data also when the part
A little
data
bit
comes for
after the
parents
scores.
too?
Yes, no. So the scores come, like preliminary scores come in early summer. By midsummer, we're looking at, actual scores for students, and then these types of reports come out in the fall. So these were sent out to teachers September-ish, October-ish. So
Not too late.
not
you
too
can
late.
still-
So they've been looking at these and making adjustments. And then Karen's been able to work really closely with Jenny Winters and Shay McCorkle, who are Regional Office of Education Consultants in Math, Science, and Social Studies. They are also doing analysis for districts who request it on these specific reports, and then also the district summary reports between 2015 and 2016 administrations of the assessment, just to give us some ideas of how we're doing, how we could do better. So we do outperform the state in reading and math. We're still struggling with some of our subgroups. And the largest gaps that we're seeing are socioeconomic levels and students with IEPs and without. These are just some general highlights from each of our buildings. In most of our buildings, again, we're outperforming the state. We have a couple of buildings that are performing similar to the state in reading and math, Elementary North and Dual. We definitely have had pockets in each of our buildings that either increase the percentage of students meeting or exceeding in a cohort group, or increase the number or percentage of students of third graders and then third graders again. So we're trying to look at those data to see if it can tell us anything about our instruction. Largest gaps that exist in each building are notated here, as well as where we've seen decreases in the achievement gap information by school. And we have improved on the achievement gap in all of our buildings in at least one of the subgroup comparisons, which is good news. The Illinois Science Assessment. We have no data on this assessment. So it was given last spring for the first time to 5th and 8th graders. So ISAT used to contain a science assessment that was given to 4th and 7th graders. Remember that? And we would get the data on that. When we changed to PARCC, Illinois was a little bit behind on determining how we were going to still assess science. And so they decided to go with this Illinois Science Assessment. It was given last spring for 5th and 8th grade. So it shifted up, 5th and 8th grade, and the results are coming this summer, we hope.
So the 8th graders are sophomore students by the time this result comes.
Yeah. So, and we're giving it again in this spring. So that's the update on the science assessment. They do continue to give us updates on how that's going. I think it's contracting on grading the assessment and those kinds of things. Any questions on PARCC or the science assessment before we move on to MAP?
Do we have
Science
results for
assessment.
science?
What?
I want to say that it's not the slowest thing. It's just
No. So we can be grateful for that. So where PARCC gives us an idea of our achievement, growth we're kind of looking at through the lens of the MAP assessment. So again, this is given in reading and math to all students in fall, winter, and spring of all grades until next year, when we're discontinuing those first two assessments for kindergarten students. It's been a consistent measure for us for a long time, almost 20 years now. Administered in English, online again with accommodations for IEP students. And that's the kindergarten update. I showed these a couple weeks ago too. When we look at analyzing, we can take growth scores, but we can also look at proficiency on this, because MAP is determined in a norm, that there is a grade level norm that we're looking at when we look at all the students across the country that take this assessment.
I had a quick question
Mhm.
before you go into this. I thought I might be mistaken. I thought we administered MAP in Spanish. Did we do that?
So MAP does allow us to administer the math assessment in Spanish. We've been administering that in our self-contained bilingual program at Elementary North and in some grades at dual language. That information is not included in here because we don't have norms for that.
Okay. So this norm, so this number on the top is 50th percentile? Is that
Yep, for the grade across all students that take it across the country.
country? Okay.
No matter what standards they're working off of or anything else. So when we talk about MAP as an assessment, where PARCC is trying to get at a deeper kind of understanding, some more performance-based assessments, MAP is definitely a survey of skills. I mean, we're looking at what skills do students have relative to what is normal within the grade level curriculum. It's designed for kids to get answers to questions wrong. It's an adaptive test. So in order for MAP to determine the grade level or RIT score that a student's working at, students have to get questions wrong. Otherwise, they can't get to the level that they're at. So if a student gets a question right, they get a harder question. If they get it wrong, they get an easier one until they figure out where the student is performing. So this is one way that we're looking at that information, is just to kind of look at, are we seeing a similar pattern in the achievement gap with the mean scores for our Hispanic and white students? And we talked about this 2 weeks ago. So
What is the green and white?
the green is just kind of the highest one that we're seeing there, the school with the highest mean. And that, again, was to illustrate that we are seeing in the School of Dual Language that while the students may start out below in terms of the mean compared to other schools, they're ending up definitely on the higher end. We are not, though, getting to grade level for our Hispanic students until 7th and 8th grade. And then we are at grade level in both middle schools for our Hispanic students. Not at the level of our white students. And, you know, somebody had asked last time, why are we comparing just white students to Hispanic students? And that does come from some research. The administrators that have gone to Harvard, they've talked about specifically the achievement gap. And when we look at students who are white, we're looking at sort of the average students. That's a picture of an average student in the United States right now. And so that's why we look at that subgroup, according to that research. Because we talked about having maybe other groups and lots of other, and we have some of that information coming forward, but this is specific just to those two groups. We see the same pattern in math for our Hispanic and white students as well. Again, we're very happy to see that our Hispanic students are at grade level by 7th and 8th grade in both buildings, according to this assessment. So these charts indicate, and they're small, so you might want to look at your presentation, but these are the mean scores, and again, trying to give you some idea of cohort information. So the colors represent the cohort data that's moving forward. White, and then Hispanic or Latino, and then Asian at the bottom. And again, we're seeing that our white students and our Asian students, for the most part, are at grade level or above, and our Hispanic students are not there until much later. 7th and 8th grade. But we do see, in terms of a cohort, that we're making the gains every year, and the students in each group are moving forward every year in terms of their mean RIT for the grade. Just another way to look at the data, reading and math. This is an interesting report that we look at every year. So this is a summary of growth, and these are reading scores. But if you look up here, the diamonds represent the projected growth that MAP would say we should have. So the diamond says in the fall, when we look at the RIT scores of all the students taking the test, this is the diamond represents how much they should grow. The box represents how much they did grow.
And they're different where the diamond is per school.
They are different by school because they're based on the RIT scores that the students start with in the fall. So they're individualized by school. And you can see in some instances we didn't make our projections, and in some instances we did. And this is some information that we look at too, when we look at grade level and how teams are addressing the needs of their students.
One of the questions earlier was about the principals discussing with each other, or the administrative team discussing with each other. So all of this information, we're trying to go from data-rich, information-poor to data-rich, information-rich. And so if we see particular patterns and we sit down and say what's occurring in a particular grade or a particular building, if we see something triangulate, so to speak, with several points of data, then we sit down and say, is there a difference? Is there something going on in that building that's making the growth occur?
Middle school information for reading and math. And again, this is growth. So this is not looking at proficiency or mean now. This is whether or not students are attaining their typical growth for the year, as normed with all the other kids in the country that start at a specific RIT. And we know that that changes depending on where they start, right?
I have a question.
Yep.
You know, I mean, this is for the grade. This is for, you know, each school separately. And each kid is different. So in the map, when you do the map, you're seeing the growth that each individual kid has, they have their own target depending on where they started.
Yes.
Do we have data on how many of our kids are meeting that target?
Yes. The percentages of students. And that is another thing that we look at. So this is sort of an aggregate of that.
This is accurate.
Yeah. And this gives you the percentage of students that are making their growth. But there are other ways that we can look at that. Statistically speaking, half of our students should make their growth.
How many are making it though?
Over half. In almost every building and almost every group. We're between 50 and 70% of our students making their typical growth, which is pretty statistically significant. I had some slides in here and I can forward those to you. It was a lot of information. And even looking at the percent of students in each subgroup, white and Hispanic and
No, I just want to know, like,
but,
you know, first grader
and I'll
in
send it
Town
to
Line,
you, but basically,
how many percentage made it? Because that is the growth achievement for, you know, individual student. And that's
this would be the best place to look at that particular information if you're looking at a grade by building. But yeah, we get percentages. You can get it by class. You can get it by grade. We can get it by building. The important thing to remember about this, and it wasn't until about 7 or 8 years ago that we realized being at a MAP workshop where we're going, oh, we only have, 56% of our students meeting their typical growth targets. The trainers and MAP are going, well, that's great because typical growth is typically what students do. That's the 50th percentile. So if more than 50% of our students are meeting those typical growth norms, then our students are performing above most of the students that are taking that test. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because typical is the average. So half of the students do less than that, and half of students do more than that. So if more than half of our students are doing what more than half the kids are doing, then we're good. Does that make sense? Yes, it does.
You explain it to me later. You're explaining it to me later.
It's good. It's a good thing, and I'll send you those percentages. But here's the point of the presentation too. There is a lot of information. There's a lot of data that our administrators and teachers look at. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at it. This is one assessment though. Each of these is one part of how our students are performing. And that's what we try to keep in mind too, that this is, when you're looking at assessment and achievement and growth, we want to look at a portfolio of assessments for a student. We're not looking at any one of these measures to determine whether or not the student is achieved or is growing appropriately. So just trying to give you an idea of all the different types of data that we look at when we're determining that. So we've took a look at proficiency, accountability from the state. We're looking at growth and proficiency with MAP. Fontes and Pinnell is an individualized reading inventory that we've been giving our students for a few years now. And this is a test where a teacher reads with a student. That's what it is. And it's administered, it has been administered fall and spring for students 2nd through 5th grade or kindergartners and 1st graders who have been reading. So we wait though until they're reading to administer that. It's administered in English for most students, although in the self-contained bilingual and dual language programs, it's available in Spanish, but only up to 3rd grade. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about the ANEAL assessment as the replacement, and we're starting to phase that in because it has tools that move all the way up to 12th grade. So we're trying to get a better measure on the Spanish portion for this. We're continuing to look at this one as a common assessment because when we look at the scores and whether or not a student is at grade level, above grade level, below grade level, this one is hard to determine. It takes a long time to give this assessment because it's individualized. We want our teachers to be doing it with each student, but the window is very large because we have to get this one done individually. And the better a reader the student is, the longer it can take to actually get to their instructional level. It's time consuming, but our teachers would say it's the most instructionally supportive because when a student is identified at a certain level, there are characteristics that go along with that. And they can say, so the student isn't just a level N. It would be that level N readers exhibit these characteristics and need to work on these things. So really, this one is the most instructionally supportive in terms of how do we determine what a student should be working on, say, in a guided reading group. But this is not information that we're aggregating at this point to determine whether or not programmatically we're meeting the needs of students, because we really can't get a handle on whether or not it's standardized enough to report that data. Because again, the window is a good month to month and a half. And that's a lot of time in instruction when you're looking at over the course of, say, 25 first graders, assessing one right away as soon as they come in and one a month and a half or a month in. So again, trying to get a handle on that one. AIMSweb is a standardized assessment for literacy and math. It's a curriculum-based measure that's quick and easy. These are 1-minute assessments that we give to our students. They are standardized and normed, and then after first grade, we utilize this as the progress monitoring and benchmarking tool for students who are in RTI in reading and math. This is a sample report from AIMSweb. The section in red is the universal screener, so you can see that the majority of students, do you see the little black bars? Those are the targets. So in first grade, the majority of our students are above the target, because that's our universal screener. Past first grade, now you're looking at all the administrations of progress monitoring for students who are struggling in an intervention or in special education. So you can see the bar kind of moves then, because these are students who are receiving additional instruction in reading. This is the reading CBM. But this is an example of a report you can get out of an AIMSweb system, and this can be aggregated by school, by grade, by year, by class. Okay, when you take all that data and then put it together, we look to ECRA to do that for us, to give us some idea of whether or not we're adding value to students' education year after year. So we can look at all that data in isolation. This is a nice tool. ECRA gives us a nice tool to kind of aggregate it all together and see whether or not students are performing where we would expect them to perform or above where we would expect them to perform, to determine whether or not we have some added value. We've talked a little bit about these reports before in terms of the dots, but when we go into the reports, you'll see blue dots indicate that students are performing higher than we would expect them to perform. So based on their history or the history of peers that are like them, students with a blue dot, they're performing above where we would expect them to perform. A green dot indicates they're doing what we would expect them to do, which can be good or it can be not so good, because if students haven't been performing well for a few years, eventually their dot's going to be green because they continue to perform at that level. The same thing where you could say if a group of students has been performing well and getting blue dots for a couple of years, if that continues, that might turn into a green because that's their expected performance. Does that make sense? So green is sort of, could go either way. Got to look at historically for that one. Yellow would mean we're statistically lower than we expect. And then red would be an area that we really need, we're seeing unsatisfactory growth in that area. These are some of the indicators or criteria that go in for each grade level. It's hard to tell, but basically in kindergarten, you're looking at MAP and AIMS. First grade, same thing. Second grade, we just have MAP because that's the year between AIMSweb and PARC. But then after third grade, you have MAP and PARC that go into these scores. And this is the data that's aggregated for the 30% teacher evaluation student performance or student growth goal for the portion of the teacher evaluation. So what I've tried to give you here are some snapshots of some reports that we can get by building. These can also be done by grade. These are broken out in the portal by ethnicity and subgroup. So there's lots of different ways, again, that we can. These are just high-level overviews of how each school is doing in reading and math. You can see there's some areas, one area in particular where we're seeing higher than expected growth, third grade math at Elementary South, and a couple of areas that we need to address, second grade in reading and math. Aspen. Again, in the green areas, you'd want to look at that. You can see in fourth and fifth grade, they're a little bit below. And then in the primary grades, they're a little bit above, but performing basically where we expect. These can also be drilled down to individual student reports where you can see a trend. If a student is performing where we expect, but they're trending up, then that's a good thing. Or if they're trending down, then we need to watch. So these are nice reports. Middle South, we talked about that 8th grade MAP score, remember? So we're seeing yellows in both 8th grades in the math, and we're wondering if that has to do with the administration of the spring test. There's a lot of assessment that goes in right before promotion, and anecdotally speaking, we've been watching those kids. They're not totally invested. School of Dual Language, we're seeing some areas. Again, these incorporate the English assessments. So we would expect to see some lower growth, but again, relative to their previous performance, those are areas we need to look at. But then in math, in kindergarten and 5th grade, we're seeing higher than expected growth. Town line, again, just high-level overviews. Some bright spots in kindergarten reading, and then a couple of areas. Middle North and Middle South have similar data in terms of the 8th grade math, something we need to look at. Elementary North, that 4th grade math is a bright spot. Some other areas we need to talk about. So essentially, that's the information that ECRA can give us, although I'll give you a glimpse into their reporting portal a little bit later. Not too much later. There's not much left. Okay, so again, another universal assessment we have is Access. This is for our limited English proficient students, or ELLs. It's administered every January. Reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Some are administered individually and some as a group. We saw really good results on our Access tests last year, all blue dots, which is nice. Over the last couple of years, we've been working on making sure that when our teachers feel like a student is ready to exit ELL programming, that we're giving them the assessment that would allow them to exit. There's different tiers of assessments, and so we're trying to make sure that when we feel like a student's ready, we're giving them the most rigorous assessment so that they have the opportunity to exit and go into the general education classroom. And so that may be why we're seeing a little bit of increases in growth based on the assessments that we've been giving. We did see, because ECRA will break this out too by ethnicity, that all of our subgroups also showed higher than expected growth except for our students with IEPs. And those would be students who cross both LEP and IEP, those subgroups. And typically writing, the expressive portions are a little bit more difficult for students, so we continue to look at the writing and speaking portions of those assessments to support our teachers with that. So, all that data together. We are definitely continuing to outperform the state, which is good news in terms of PARCC. We do see some achievement gaps and disparities in growth for our students, specifically in terms of SES and IEP. And so that's what we're working to address. So, action steps. We're going to go through these quickly. We've been talking about the Guaranteed Viable Curriculum, working on our common summative and formative performance assessments, because we're trying to give ourselves indicators before we get to these assessments. So having those common benchmarks along the way. Full day kindergarten is a big investment for early intervention. And we've been talking a lot about that program and making sure that we're doing the best we can in that program, making tweaks along the way too for full day kindergarten. We do appreciate the early release time and days. Has been critical for us. We know technology is coming. Specifically in language arts, writing is going to be our focus in terms of next year, finding a common resource for the writing curriculum. We've already started this spring articulating with not only our high school district, but also District 70, Libertyville Elementary District, in terms of what is being expected at the high school for writing, and then working backwards from there in terms of how we can support our students. We've have a new resources in math. They're relatively new. They're a few years old now. Alex is a resource that's an online personalized diagnostic tool and intervention resource that goes along with our math program. It's going to become a more consistent feature in 6 to 8 now that our students will all have Chromebooks, because it's all administered online, but it's a great tool for differentiation. In science, we are implementing new resources this year, and we're looking to invest in more STEM resources next year, supplemental STEM resources, which our teachers saw last year, but we weren't able to provide along with the science foundational resource. So we're trying to get those in place for next year.
The science will be done this year?
Science is in place this year.
It's in place this year?
Yep. There's
math, ELA is, language arts is in place, math is in place, right?
Language arts at 6 to 8. We have StudySync. We've had it for a few years, which is a consistent resource in ELA 6 to 8. We have Raz Kids and News ELA and some other smaller supplemental resources at K-5. Right now, writing is the only resource that I'm looking to put something in place for all schools in ELA, a writing resource. And that'll be next year. We'll start looking at that.
So you'd start looking at it, so it won't be in place for 20...
Probably not.
2018, 2019.
But part of that is looking at just an audit of our curriculum too, and where those writing standards are and what's happening in
No,
instruction
it's
and
still,
writing.
I mean, so it
Yeah.
won't be in place this year, it'll be in place.
Probably.
take one more year.
Because we're also working on social studies.
So
we
this
have-
is this year, right?
Yes. We have a pilot this year in 6th grade, a social studies program. You know the standards were new as of spring of this year, and so we're still playing catch up with the publishers on whether or not they have anything aligned. The standards didn't change too much in K2 or 7-8, but 3 to 6, they've adjusted, and publishers are behind. So we're piloting some materials for 6. So far, so good. We have 2 more companies that are coming in, TCI and Pearson, to provide a formal overview of their resources, hoping to get another pilot started next year to give the publishers a little time to catch up with the standards. And then hopefully, not next year for social studies full implementation, but for the next year after that. So 18-19 for social studies. And obviously, we've been working on a few things in terms of closing achievement gaps. I'm not going to go through all of this, but to highlight the fact that we've been doing a lot of work in our bilingual ELL departments and special education, obviously, related towards our audit, creating a more inclusive environment for all of our students. Our Title I schools have implemented more intense parent-teacher conferences that include supporting parents, knowing what assessments we're giving to students, helping them to even sometimes engage with those and their students at home. We're so proud that our NEST program is beginning. Katie Wagner's done an awesome job already getting started on that. Parent engagement and leadership opportunities. You saw 2 members of our bilingual parent advisory committee up here tonight. They've done a lot of work for us. Continuing to look at our RTI process and our summer school programming. And just as an aside, we do look at even program evaluations in other ways. So this is an example of looking at students after they're in ELL programming. So monitoring students who have exited ELL programming and looking at how many are falling below that benchmark and monitoring them year after year to make sure that even once they exit that, they're getting what they need within the classroom. This is a screenshot from the ECRA portal where we can disaggregate our data down pretty specifically. You can see all the filters on the left. So we can take a specific assessment, go to a grade, go to students in RTI. This one has to do with students who are in RTI in 4th grade for the winter map assessment of last year. So that's and then I did a static screenshot because if you roll over those dots, they'll tell you the name of the student and the data associated with that student. So that's a nice tool for us. And then ECRA also does some program evaluations. This is on following students who specifically have engaged with any of our summer programs. So HEI, ESY is our summer special education program, anyone engaged with the music camp, summer scholars, or students who have not participated with summer programming. So there's lots of different ways that we use the data to kind of determine what's most effective for our students. And obviously everything goes along with our strategic plan. And HBC has been working really hard on measuring those goals too, as if we don't measure enough. But we are also specifically looking to measure how our students are feeling in school and whether or not they're feeling like school is a great place to be, because ultimately we know that's going to affect achievement and growth. Questions?
I don't want to ask a ton of specific questions, but when you're talking about the writing curriculum, what are the standards? And I don't know if this is tied into writing at all. I guess my first question is it even tied into writing when we're talking about things like spelling, punctuation, grammar conventions, things that I'm actually not one of those parents that says my kid should be learning math the same way I did. I'm actually okay with the way they're learning it, even though people make fun of Common Core and all that good stuff. But I feel like I'm definitely noticing way fewer abilities as far as spelling and grammar and that sort of stuff. So does that go along with the writing curriculum? And if it doesn't, what are the standards that we're expected to meet as far as that? I understand all of our computers nowadays come with spell check and that good stuff, but it just doesn't replace having that understanding of the actual.
No, that's a completely valid point. Actually, we're having that same conversation. It is incorporated within the standards. It's embedded within our units. However, when we look at assessing students' writing, we do put an emphasis on content and organization and ideas and voice over what we would in terms of spelling and grammar and punctuation, because there are other tools for that, but at the same time, we're seeing a lack there too. We have utilized the literacy classes and the writing classes at 6 to 8 to try to shore up some of that, but that will be incorporated into the discussion with a resource to support teachers in the area of writing, specifically with regard to grammar. Spelling really has to do with reading. They're really closely tied together in terms of patterns and those kinds of things. So just as recently as the last early release day, K1 and 2 had a conversation specifically around spelling and word lists and word families and which are addressed in what order, and settling on a scope and sequence and some of those kinds of things. So yes, continually in discussion about that.
Just one of those areas I would love to see go back to the way it's taught and tested. I really am not a fan of the way it's currently taught and tested.
In K2, we're leaning that way, but by third grade, we really want to see it more in terms of vocabulary and contextualized, especially for our students with special needs who are learning a second language or who have, because the spelling lists, while helpful and informative to some degree, you typically don't see transfer from a spelling list to a writing piece, and that's what we're going for. Students definitely know how to study for a spelling test and get that good score on the Friday test. But again, once they study for that, if it's not really embedded and contextualized for them, they're going to keep making that same mistake. So we really are trying to tie it to reading patterns and those kinds of skills so that it transfers and it's not just for the test, if that makes sense.
We give a lot of assessments and they are all good, but one of the strategic plan or one of our goals is like each student should meet their growth target, right? They have to meet their growth efficiency. How are we, with the collection of all that, I'd like to know how many of our students are meeting that. Whether like some are bad test takers, or with the common assessments and things that we do in class. I mean, what we do in class tests their proficiency, I'm assuming. Proficiency about a subject that was taught, a unit that was taught. So how are we measuring that, and where are we in that whole spectrum of things?
The group, in HPC, we have subgroups and subcommittees, and the group that I've been working with, the Learning Targets Committee, has to do with 100% of our students meeting or exceeding their learning targets right there in our strategic plan. And our group has been talking for a couple of years, how do we take this data and put it into a picture of proficiency or growth for a student? And what has come of that is individualized goal setting for our students, and I'm hoping that any of you with students right now have seen the goal setting sheets that our students are doing that have to do with MAP or personal goals. And what we're trying to gather with that information is whether or not each student is meeting a couple of the growth and proficiency targets we would have for them individually every year, and then aggregating that together. At the end of this year, we will have finished our first consistent district-wide goal setting for all students in K-8, and we will be able to aggregate whether or not our students have met their learning targets for the year. We've worked with teachers and administrators to develop grade level forms that are consistent across the district. In K1, we have forms that really focus mainly on literacy. By second through fifth grade, we're incorporating a personal goal of some kind, and then again at 6-8, we're incorporating multiple goals throughout the year. And our teachers
come in with the report card just so that the parent knows that whatever the goals were, or did they meet their growth targets, so it's just going to come with the report
They
card.
should have been communicated at parent-teacher conferences.
No,
and
it
then
is, but at the end
yes,
of the year,
and then
like
at the
you
end
said.
of the year, yes.
Like it should come home.
Yep.
Because we don't have a parent-teacher conference in June 4th or 5th.
Yes,
Right? So
those will come home, but then also be aggregated for us as a district for the first time to see what percentage of our students are getting to those learning targets, because we really did not want it to rest all on MAP
no, I
or
agree,
park
but that's why
or
I'm
those
asking
kinds
if
of
we do
things. So,
enough of this.
yep, that's coming. It's exciting. Our teachers have really said it's made a big difference with students just being aware of their data and making action plans to improve. So I'm excited to see that data come at the end of the year.
Any other questions? Okay, if you have some, you can email Superintendent Brown. I thank you for your time in putting that presentation together and all the work that went into it.
Thank you. And I would just say one more thing. Thank you. If I could reiterate, our administrative team that's still with us, any teachers that are here or listening, really the tremendous amount of work that's been done in the last few years, not only in terms of curriculum, but looking at the data and trying to make adjustments. We really have an unbelievable staff here that should be commended. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we have 2 remaining discussion items. One of them is fairly short, but we're going to do the other one first. The third item is 2017-2018 enrollment projections and boundary implications. Okay, if you recall, last summer, we had an unexpected increase in enrollment. We also experienced some increase in enrollment this winter during the break. So one of the things the board wanted to do was to stay ahead of this and try to get an idea going into next year what our enrollment might look like and what types of impact that might have on our already crowded schools and our resources. So with that, we have a discussion item for tonight.
All right, in your packet is, there are 3 sheets. One is something for Elementary South's projected. Then there are kindergarten projections, and then also I've given you some InfoSnap information on kindergarten. So I'll start with the colorful sheet, the kindergarten projections. It's in 3 colors. As you know, whenever you write something, it makes sense to you, and then when somebody else reads it, they may go, What I've tried to do is start each year for the last 3 years, calculate the percentage of total kindergarten enrollment that appears from our kindergarten registration process, or that are in InfoSnap. So in the green shows in 15-16, I calculated, and we were the number of students that we knew of was 344, and the previous enrollment was 442, and that was roughly around 78%. In red, it shows last year, we have enrollment of 453, and last year at this time we had 365 students, giving us roughly 80% enrollment. So right now, looking at the current year, we don't have, sort of kind of goes 1 year and back. So if we use the 453, I have 339 students. If I use the model of 80%, I'm projecting that we will have 425 to 430 kindergartners, which is a slightly smaller kindergarten class. It comes out to about 1.2 students per classroom across the district, so it's not like it's huge. And it depends on how they distribute. So one building might have 6 less, and if they're a section of 3, that's 2 less per classroom. That's great. Somebody else may end up with 10 more than they had this year. It's just kind of how they distribute. But being that this pattern around 80% seems to be holding, it does give me a model to try to predict what do I think the incoming kindergarten class will be, and I think it'll be between the 425 to 430. I have a typo there, around 430. Our current kindergarten is 453, so roughly 20 students less. It's important to note that we predicted the district at 450 kindergarten students. So if we hit 450, that means you're 25 per class in every classroom. Being a little below that is nice, because then maybe we'll have a little bit fewer students in each classroom if we could. The next one that I ask you to look at is just the one that's kind of InfoSnap, and it just gives you that breakdown. Last year, the 2016-17, as of February 27th, you can see each building and how many kindergartners we knew were coming. Now, you can see at Elementary South last year, at that time we had 126. Actually ended up with not all 126 people move, things changed, but you can see that we are slightly down off of InfoSnap by building for the most part as well. Aspen last year was 69, right now it's at 68. Elementary North was 93, right now it's 77. Elementary South was 126, now it's 114. Town Line is 64, it went up by 2, it's 66 right now. And dual language is really roughly around 16, could be 20. That one's a controlled enrollment. We try to get to 75. The 16 number you're seeing are probably siblings that we know are coming into that program. But you get a sense of, it's a confirmation off of the big number that, okay, these numbers are down just a little bit. Same time of year, after the same enrollment event, giving us about 80% of what we think we'll get. So that helps me understand kind of what we might be expecting as we come forward. So then the question is, last year, we had a unexpected spike in enrollment at Elementary South again. We added 2 portables. The 2 portables are the equivalent of 2 classrooms. It's one big portable with 2 classrooms. So it increases the enrollment capacity of that facility by 50 students. So it went from 725 to 775 is the capacity of the building. Right now we're sitting with 777 students distributed out. This last sheet is a prediction sheet off of current enrollment, where first grade's been moved to second grade's been moved to third to fourth, and then I put in 125 for kindergarten. So the current enrollment for 2016-17, you see by grade, and the total 777. I've told you how many classrooms there are, classroom teachers for each grade. And then projected, so all I've done is taken the grade and advanced it by 1 grade and added in 125. Right now I have nothing that would indicate to me that I would get more than that off of any of our models. And then I've indicated how many classrooms there would be. And so we go from 33 this year, if this holds to 31. We reduce the enrollment roughly by 20 students, 21 students. Because what happens is our 5th grade across the districts is a large 5th grade. Our 5th grade has 502 students in it. That's the largest grade level we have, K through 8. So it's one of those bubble classes. But South is losing 146 5th graders and potentially adding 125 kindergartners. With those numbers, now there's no recommendations at this point. This is information to give to you to think about, ask questions, and then in the first meeting in March, I'd come back and say, here's what I think we'd need to do. With these numbers at this point, I don't know that, if you recall last year, there were 2 models, potentially move some students or add portables. We went to the added portables. I'm right now creating a model as if we were to move a neighborhood. I'm looking at the 2 similar neighborhoods right now, but if you were to move one, what is the implications to South's enrollment? How does that play out? And what are the implications to the building that would receive those students? We anticipate Elementary North is going into its last year of sort of the reorg piece. Its 5th grade is not at 4 sections. It will be at 4 sections next year. We anticipate 100 students per grade level. There's one grade that's a little higher, and some are at 99, but we anticipate North will now fulfill that plan. We expect Aspen was designed to reduce as that goes. We expect that it could still reduce. So I'm creating the model right now on what it would look like if we move certain neighborhoods or certain areas to try to provide any relief to Elementary South. Right now, I would say with the reduction of 20 some students and potentially gaining a classroom, maybe 2, depending on how the enrollment in kindergarten goes, I don't know that there would necessarily be a need, but I will finalize that information for you on March. But I wanted to show you the numbers so that you would generate any questions you might have for me. Now, you hear me use the term, and so a board member asked me today, you hear me use the term, right now off of the preliminary projections, if I were to move the neighborhood, it had 46 or 47 students. It now has 48. They're fairly stable neighborhoods. They're not going up and down. The apartment complex fluctuates and has been going up and down. So it doesn't matter the neighborhood right now, but just as a model, if I move a neighborhood that had 48 to Aspen, I predict that I would have to add 4 teachers to the building at certain grade levels, because one grade has 9, let's say, like, and I don't remember off the top of my head, let's say 9, 3rd grade had 9 additional. 5th grade had 11 additional. You add those into the projected enrollment, and it may put it over its enrollment, and you'd have to add a teacher. Now, when I say add a teacher, I haven't finished my calculation to see if South would lose a teacher. So if I lose 9 out of 3rd grade, does that put Elementary South's numbers at a low enough number that I just transfer a teacher over? That piece needs to still be calculated. But what I wanted to share with you were the initial calculations for Elementary South, that we are losing a large and anticipate a targeted 125, and that the numbers this year, if we hold to that 80% from kindergarten, would put us slightly lower in our incoming kindergarten. That by no means means we're finding space everywhere, because if you recall, we have displaced programs at South, displaced programs at North. I mean, you have them in almost all the buildings, Town Line. We have programs other places. So if a classroom opens, it takes one of those displaced programs back, and we go from there. But so this is the initial information. I will have calculations on what the impact would be on a receiving building, calculations on how that would be at staff, and also I'll be verifying other neighborhoods. Are there other neighborhoods to consider? Right now I just used the initial 2 to look at. I verified that they were stable. Both only gained 1 or 2 students in the entire year, so they seem fairly stable. I will look at the others. I do have that spreadsheet. If you recall, we had a spreadsheet that showed the neighborhoods, and then I can look in and see how many new students we gain. You, of course, obviously take the kindergartners out because they're all new, but you can look and see what grades and what areas grow, and then it tells me the total enrollment. So we are starting the process now, per request, to give the information right now. I don't know if you were to say, right now, what would you do? I don't know that we'd need to make a significant change because the decreased enrollment because of that large bubble class. The flip side on that, we have 502 students going into middle schools that are the largest class we've had. I don't know if we've ever had a grade level above 500 before. We know that we went from 430 to 450 as an average, but fifth grade's rather large. So as you review this information, please send me any questions you have. I'll send you the models that I developed as they complete, so you have some time to review those. But I anticipate coming back and
My biggest question would be, since you have the 5th grade 502, and these were some of these are grandfathered kids. So, you know, the kids at Town Line and Aspen will move, so they're not going to stay at Middle North or Middle South just because of their boundary lines. Could we, in March when we come back, could we get a projection of what they're doing? Because North is above capacity now, and if they get so many more students, you know, I just want to know, do we have a plan for them? Does Mr. Collins and Mr. Siva have a plan for those kids, depending on, because it is a bubble class everywhere. The
So
5th grade in Town Line is a bubble.
So if I understand you, out of the 502, how many are going north, how many are going south middle schools, and then how are we addressing those needs within them?
Yeah, because South probably, because it does have capacity, it is not at full at capacity, but it's North, which is over capacity already right now.
It's full.
If they get it, I mean, by teacher projections and stuff, like, I'd like to know that.
And tomorrow we're working on the staffing as a whole team to say, all right, what are the staffing implications for these classes circulating up, and also the students coming in.
Yeah.
So we should be able to tell.
Okay.
Are we doing anything to identify with our existing families, whether they have non-school age kids that might be coming up and trying to track them?
You like sort of between the 0 and 4
Yeah.
ages.
Yeah.
We do through our preschool, and now with the work with the NEST program, we are trying to get some outreaches to the preschools around us that we usually don't engage in. Parents, we're trying to get that information. I don't have an accurate count at this point, but we figure we'll probably send out a survey and say, what do you have coming to us and at what age, and we can start making.
But with our registration, can't we just ask our families to identify any siblings that are not yet in school,
I think
and then start tracking them?
we can add that in there. We haven't, but we can add
I
that.
mean,
was
I
just
think
thinking-
that would help in planning from a numbers
Smaller way
standpoint.
we used to do that, like in January, they used to send a note home saying you have a sibling that'll be in kindergarten next year.
Right.
This would be a little bit broader, but I didn't even see that note come home.
I'll have to look into it.
Did I save my spot? I don't know if I saved my spot in Middle North.
I will, back to the question, I will look at
Senior spot.
finding
No,
ways
but
to
like,
do that.
are you going to be at the school district? There's a letter that used to come, right?
Yeah, you're
Like,
right. Are you
like-
still gonna be here?
are you
I'll
still
have-
going to be in the school district? I didn't see that letter come
I'll
in.
have to check it.
But I have a 5th grader. He doesn't think anything is important.
I mean, because then, we could have some idea,
Right.
2 to 3 years out,
Right.
what our existing population's gonna be from our
Well,
families, and then, we know what new houses will be built, and
that-
we can see.
The demographics study does that some regard. It takes the birth rates and then tries to calculate.
Yeah, but we could
So
just
can-
ask, we could just add one question in the registration, that would,
Unless we have historical information, that's one portion of our incoming students. We don't know what the other portion. So, let's say, like you said, we've got 400 150 kindergartners coming in. Siblings make up 150 of those, okay? We know that next year. What does that tell us? Nothing. Really, because unless we know whether the other 300 kids are going to be there or not, we don't know anything. So unless you have built up that historical information of every year, you typically have so many siblings, and then you can say, okay, that makes up 40% of our incoming incoming kindergartners, then that might give us some idea, but just
can
having
start
that small
now.
piece really doesn't help.
We can ask the question to see if that data is useful over a period of time. The demographic study does some
That
of that
already
for us.
takes care of that.
When we did the reorganization, if you recall, the board asked me how many siblings are there because of the question on grandfathers. So if you had a fourth grader, they may have one or two. If you recall, it dropped off pretty quickly. The families had 2 children, some had 3, but after that, the number shrank considerably. Verbal reports from the registrars are that our families are coming in with more students now, more children in the house than that they had experienced in the past. Now, we haven't got any scientific hard numbers on it. It's just they show up and now they're registering 3, maybe 4 kids. In the past, you'd register 1, maybe 2. So we're trying to gather how that might be occurring. But we can look at asking the question and collect it and then see if it informs us.
I'll tell you, when last weekend when it was warm outside, I've never seen so many non-school age kids in my neighborhood. I'm talking 50 kids in strollers or
We dropped them off
non-school
in my
age. Yeah.
neighborhood.
That's true.
You're the OG
What-
of Hawthorne Club, Jeff. It's almost time to get out.
So we are growing. There is we are growing.
What, maybe Dr. Martin, what was the enrollment of South Forty into kids across the Aspen? I mean, like, what would it? I mean, because I would imagine that. I mean, maybe you would know. To me, the main concern so far is, we had
How much did it grow?
portables. Does it feel any less crowded in there, or does it feel worse than when the portables were in there and lower enrollment?
Well, let me answer your question on when we made the decision on portables. Let me go find. I won't give the answer now because I want to make sure I'm accurate. Go find what the enrollment numbers were at that time,
769.
and then tell you what they were. Yeah, I want to go back and look. Yeah, we have an older. I have a presentation I gave then. So let me look at that and then answer that question for you. Say we were at this number, and how much did we gain from here to here at that point? So let me go look at that. It's always going to feel.
No,
there.
listen, I know it's packed, but I mean, there's a difference about, using the stage for different stuff and having, kids walking.
There's a difference in 25. If I lose 25 students in 5 grade levels, that's 5 kids per grade level, and I have 5 classrooms, that's 1 kid per class. It's probably not going to make the building feel significantly different in the rotation. But if I lose 25 kids in 5th grade because I have 6 sections that go to 5, I also have 1 classroom that isn't being put through the rotations for our music PE, and there's 1 classroom. It may have a different feel or a different impact on it. So it's the same question. 25 kids spread out, or 25 kids in 1 grade level that is removed. That makes somewhat of a difference in how it goes. So I'll work with Jill and we'll get some of those answers for you when you come back in March. You'll get it before then, but then you'll have the information before then. Because it's full. It was full at that time. We added the portables and it's still full, but we should be losing some students. It's hard to make a decision too early because the decisions always cause costs or implications of families. So if you make a decision early and then everybody goes, oh, wait a minute, you didn't get the numbers, you moved them or you added a portable and you didn't need to. If you wait too late to confirm what you have, then you waited too long. So right now, it's difficult. But I have confidence in those numbers for kindergarten because we've been running 80%. I think we're going to be pretty good. And if it's 430 and it went to 450, that's a 20 student swing. And it still stays within the projections of what we were trying to do.
That's for the beginning of this. How many students South took in over the course of the school year?
How many did they lose?
Right, or what would be the
That's
49 additional throughout it?
I don't know off the top of my head how many they lost either. Because there is an in and an out.
Right, do you
So-
know what would be a plus minus? Even
That
on
accounts
top
for
of
the
the ones that you
loss.
lost, so, okay, I mean, so,
But I want to confirm that.
right.
We're talking off
confirm
the top of our
that.
head, I want to
Right,
make sure of
definitely
that.
confirm that.
And that's why the portables were added to kind of gain that additional 50.
Because given what we're doing and projected growth,
Right.
The
it's
whole
safe
district
to,
just had a lot of growth.
it's safe, no, but it's safe
Right.
to assume that it's gonna get another hit. I mean, throughout the year, I mean, 'cause
Yeah.
well, I mean, that's what we based our whole plan on.
But what I want to do is give you, let me give you the numbers. So I want to look at those and make sure we get the actual numbers, just not off the top of our head, to make sure they're as accurate as possible.
Okay, any other questions or information people are interested in? All right, last discussion item, first student renewal for 2017-2018.
Yes, we're recommending we renew our contract with First Student for our activity, summer school, and charter transportation. We can extend our contract for this year. The proposal is for a 4% increase in summer school routes and a 3% increase on charter and activity routes. Spend about $97,000 a year on busing with First Student, so this would equate to about a $3,000 increase. This additional addresses additional salary increases as well as healthcare costs associated with our busing for summer charter and activity. I did check into Lakeside just for a comparison on rates, and their quotes were about 47% higher than First Student. That's a significant difference, and I imagine it wouldn't be much different if we went with went out to bid. Our prices are pretty reasonable with First Student.
Have some of the issues that we experienced last year regarding extracurricular buses and availability been corrected this
They've
year?
been corrected. We had some issues at the beginning of the year, but they're servicing us better. Both companies are having a little bit easier time, I guess, getting drivers than they were last year. So we've seen a decrease in the problems in getting charters and having to notify parents at the last minute to pick up. So we haven't seen it. It's an improvement.
Thanks. Any questions?
Any incidences that have they had, like a railway gate coming down on them?
No, we've done a lot to correct. Those were mainly with Lakeside, and we've addressed those issues. We're sending half of our buses north on Hawthorne Parkway, and then half of them are turning onto Town Line Road. So we've seen a lot of ease in congestion there because they're
No,
not
but
trying
just,
to.
I mean, that was an example, but any
Yeah.
incidences of any sort have you, like,
I mean, we have some minor fender benders sometimes, or
yeah, I know
those
people
things
can't see a
happen.
big yellow bus, but.
Yeah,
No, they've improved significantly. The reporting, the being on time with things.
Yeah.
We've seen improvements.
we have better communication. Our dispatcher is not driving a bus due to the lack of drivers that we were seeing last year, and that's helped quite.
Okay, so I just wanted to know them. If
We've
they're-
had good service this year overall.
Brad, I know we're happy with Lakeside, but that's a pretty significant difference in price and charging. Is First Student an option to replace Lakeside for our other transportation
It would be
needs?
much different cost structure
Okay.
for that. It happens to be in this, but certainly it's something we can look at possibly. We have our renewal for next year already for Lakeside, but at this time next year it's possible to look and just kind of get a feeling. But we actually just got a survey on busing from our surrounding districts. We did a survey, and our prices are some of the lowest in the area.
The others, sometimes I'm not saying they did this, but sometimes those routes are more nuisance than valuable. So we're going to do it. We want to charge you this amount because it's going to be worth the effort to do it. Now, I don't know if that happened, but my previous experience was when you went for summer routes or you went for extracurricular routes, some folks, they didn't really want to do it, so they outpriced themselves. But so if you came back, they knew they were going to make a sweet profit. So, okay, well, it's worth it if I'm going to make that much of it. But sometimes it's very hard for them to get those taken care of. So
A lot of it has to do with the timing of the routes, just because some of these routes occur right when we're letting out our middle schools, and our buses are busy doing our second and third tier routes, so they just don't have the availability, the manpower and the buses available to do it. So that's why it would cost significantly higher, because they'd have to get them maybe from another district way across town to here. That would jack up.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll vote on that at the next meeting. We have 2 action items tonight. Policy 2-125, Travel Expense Account Act. This was discussed at the last meeting. It's changes to the board travel policy as a result of recent Illinois legislation mandating these changes, bringing more oversight and accountability to district travel expense reimbursement. So the policy has been revised. Any questions related to those revisions to the travel policy? Okay, do I have a motion regarding them?
I recommend that the Board of Education approve Policy 2-125, Travel Expense Account Act as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, motion by Jeannie, seconded by Sonali. Roll call vote.
Jason Tron.
Aye.
Jeannie Engelmeyer.
Aye.
Sonali Patil.
Aye.
Robin Klieg. Aye. Lou Gata.
Aye.
Gita Mueller.
Aye.
Jeff Bard.
Aye. Motion passes 7 ayes, 0 nay. Second action item concerns the telephone system. We had a presentation and a review of purchase of a replacement telephone system. Maybe we can just get a brief summary related to the bids and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we did get an RFQ out to 3 vendors. We had our vendor we're recommending, TIG, services the Mitel equipment, which is the same equipment, obviously updated to the next generation. Purchase price is $201,458, and 4-year additional maintenance at $58,000. And we're recommending TIG for this replacement system.
Our current system equipment is no longer
End of-
supported by the
It's
vendors.
reached end of life as of December, so it would be very difficult to find parts and service for it. So in order to maintain the integrity of our system, it's time to replace it.
Okay, any questions? Okay, we did have a presentation and discussion prior. Is there a motion to approve the TIG Mitel telephone system?
I move that the Board of Education approve TIG Mitel as the provider for the new telephone system as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion by Jeannie, second by Sonali, since it involves an expenditure of district funds. Roll call vote.
Jeff Bard.
Aye.
Gita Mueller.
Aye.
Lou Gata.
Aye.
Robin Klieg. Aye. Sonali Patil.
Aye.
Jeannie Engelmeyer.
Aye.
Jason Tron.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 7 ayes, 0 nay. President's report, the IASB spring meeting is March 8th at North Chicago High School. There's also a school board candidates briefing that night. Potential school board members, those running for election, are welcome to attend. Please see either Superintendent Brown or Wendy. I believe you've got a letter in the mail inviting you, so if you're interested in attending, it would be some good information. If you can't make it, there's plenty of training after you're elected. And then school board members, if you want to attend the spring dinner also, please let Wendy know. I think tomorrow was the requested deadline. So that's all I have. Superintendent's report.
Some student spotlights. Middle School North, Middle School South on 225. Many band, orchestra, and chorus students participated in the solo ensemble contest at Lake Zurich. North Middle School, our students did an awesome job. March 1st, students from Middle School North and Middle School South will be participating in We Day at the Allstate Arena. Middle School North is hosting the IGSMA Music Organization Contest on Friday, March 10th through the 11th. Patrick Contigello has spent a lot of time organizing this event. We appreciate that. It's a lot of work. Middle School North is hosting the 7th grade girls volleyball championship this week. 8th grade girls volleyball championship will be hosted by Middle School South. Middle School North, Middle School South boys volleyball championship will be held at the 8th grade boys Grays Lake, 7th grade boys at Lake Zurich South. Science Olympiad is busy preparing for sectionals in Oakton. Town Line Science Olympiad training starts this week with 75 students participating. Last year we had 58 that took part, so this event is growing as we go. PTO Mother-Daughter Tea at the Sullivan Center, 1 to 3 p.m. on the 4th of March. Kashmir Pulaski Day, no school for all students. It was, if we get a blizzard between now and then, we would make it up. Cross your fingers.
62 degrees on Sunday.
Yeah,
woohoo! Looking pretty good.
Think we're going to be all right. March 7th is the end of this trimester 2. March 8th, Middle School North, Middle School South jazz concert at Vernon Hills High School, 7:30 p.m. Special education informational meeting for parents is on the 15th of March at the district office, starting at 7 p.m. As noted earlier in the meeting, we have a new parent Twitter, some suggestions coming out from there on how to help your students learn. We did have our female volunteer mentoring folks get together this week or last week and meet and continue their planning on how to take part in that. So we're excited about that. We have a Nest event coming up at the library, and that group is getting organized. And I believe at the next board meeting, Dr. Martin will be introducing the new board members for the Education Foundation. So those 3 new initiatives are moving along and moving along well. And again, each one, if you tie back to some of the research from Harvard and other places on how to help students be successful. And so there is a lot of great work going on by a lot of great people in the district. All the wireless access points have been installed in all the buildings. They are now getting sort of tested and, I forget the term, but programming them in to make them work. And we're doing some more of the background information, back work for the infrastructure. So we still are on target for our rollout. And we will be working in the next 2 weeks, reviewing and finalizing acceptable use policies. If there are any changes to our policy needed, or just an acceptable use agreement, is what a lot of districts are doing. So it's not actually a policy, it fits our policy, but an acceptable use agreement for parents. And we'll be rolling out some of the, I've sent to you previously, some professional development for staff that we can also use for parents to be sending out. So we're moving along, moving and grooving on those things.
Okay, a couple other things. There's a series of informational sessions that have been arranged for the community related to the referendum. So they're factual sessions only. I believe you're going to attend
Yes,
all of them.
I'm posting those.
It would be helpful if a board member, no more than 2, attended, but if a board member wanted to attend, see Superintendent Brown. Again, they're factual only. One is at Aspen Drive Library on Saturday, March 18th from 9 to 10:30. One is at the Sullivan Center with the Park District on March 20th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And one is at the Vernon Hills Senior Organization, March 7th at 1 p.m. And then they're also trying to arrange one with the Vernon Hills Indian Association. I don't think that's set up yet.
That's not set up in, I do have several folks meeting with me tomorrow, and I believe they're trying to arrange a meeting for me to come to their organization. Sure, so we're going to provide the information as much as.
And then, is there a HEA candidate forum set up yet?
There is, I forget the date. They have worked on something. It should be coming out very soon, if it hasn't already, to be invite the candidates to come to that. But I apologize, I don't remember off the top of my head. But I think we were just finalizing that date. I'll email out to you, but they'll be getting a letter from the HA to invite them to participate.
Okay, great. So that's a night where the school board candidates get to answer questions in front of the community and get to see what they're all about. Okay, any topics for future meetings? New topics? All
Before I
right.
go to future, could we get an update about the consultant? The
Oh,
referendum
yes.
consultant?
I'm sorry. For the, do you want one right now, or do you want it for the?
No, I want it right now.
Right
I'm
now?
paying him for it.
Okay, there we go.
I want to know what he has done in the past 2 odd weeks.
You want an update?
Yeah, what
Okay.
has he done in the past 2 weeks? We only have him for a month.
Right, yeah, 6 weeks. We have informational flyers and tax information flyers that have been created that have been distributed at the kindergarten event and at open houses, that people can pick them up. Those will be posted on our Facebook page and
Those
also.
look really nice.
Folks that are asking for those, we're handing those out to them. They are right now developing a flyer, a mailer to go out to our community to let people know what the question is and where we're at. They're finalizing that. They're working with me right now to help do like a Twitter. Believe it or not, I'm going to be Mr. Twitter. It sounds like, but like a Twitter community roundtable where you do it digitally, electronically with folks. So they're working to prepare that for me and train me on how to do that. And so they're helping us get the information out in the best way we can.
So these flyers have already gone out?
Some of those are, yeah, they've been handed.
They were like out at conferences and it got registration.
Do you bring them to those informational meetings that you're going to have?
Yeah, and those, if we make changes, we will. If we update things, we will.
So they'll be
Yeah.
I had a question about this flyer since it's gone out. It says it's STEM renovations at all middle schools. We don't have a STEM centers at middle schools, so we were going to build new ones.
Right, but it could be in the media centers, but we're adding the STEM. I mean, I guess the word renovation can be changed to additions, but it's space within in the building. We're adding classrooms. We're renovating space within.
Okay.
We do have STEM and we do have STEM activities in the buildings.
Yeah, but I don't know, when it says STEM renovations, it sounded like, we have a center that we are, or maybe that's how it sounds to me.
No, I agree.
It sounded like,
Yeah.
I have something and I'm renovating it. If you don't have.
We can make changes as we go.
I think it
Okay,
sounds
well,
fine.
any other questions? Okay, the board will reconvene into closed session, and then we'll adjourn from there.
Is there time
Probably. And then this is for you from the school of the language.
Yeah, I got that.